political groups. Members who received speaking time from their political groups or the non-attached secretariat, they will be called to speak and will be reminded by the chair of their allotted speaking time. Please keep an eye on the screens. You will see the current speaker and the next two speakers displayed, and then, of course, when your name appears as the next speaker, I would ask you to make your way to the lectern. The normal rules regarding the blue cards and catch the eye procedure will apply to the debate, and we will try to give as many colleagues the speaking time. So I start first with the Council, Minister for European Union, Adam Schwabka. 5 minutes.
Honourable members, Commissioner, it's a great pleasure to be here as a presidency in the European institution with direct legitimacy of our societies. We are aware of challenges, we are aware of expectation, but we are ready to take this responsibility together as our top priority is security and regaining European competitiveness. We are ready as a presidency to work close with European Parliament during trialogues, so I hope it will be a very good time for the European Union. So now let me present the statement from the Council. President, honourable members, Commissioner, thank you for inviting the Council to participate in this very timely and important debate, especially given the geopolitical context in which we operate. Poland took over the presidency of the Council of the European Union at a time of uncertainty and concern. We are witnessing, among other things, rising geopolitical tensions, the erosion of the rule-based international order, and hybrid attacks on European democracy and security. More recently, increasing instances of interference in political processes in the EU that took place on social media further contribute to this worrying picture. One of the priorities during our 6-month presidency is to strengthen Europe's resilience against foreign interference and disinformation. This is a task for both the EU and the individual member states. Empowerment of the civil society is a key priority within this area so that it can effectively contribute to an online environment free from information manipulation and interference. Equally important are long-term efforts in the areas of civil education, as well as supporting and protecting the independence of credible media. We are certainly not starting from the scratch, and the Digital Service Act is one of the key legislative tools adopted during the last legislative cycle that plays a role in this process. Let me recall here that the objective of the DSA is to ensure a safe online environment. It obliges the platforms to tackle illegal content and the social risk that the dissemination of disinformation or other content may generate. The rules are clear. A very large online platform must take measures to manage the risk related to negative effects on democratic and electoral processes. If needed, and where necessary, the platforms must adopt their algorithm systems and their recommender systems. The Council is fully supportive of the Commission's supervision action in this area, as demonstrated by the Commission's response to all incidents that have occurred since the DCA came into force. I should also mention the specific obligation of the supervisory authorities of the Member State, where the service provider is to ensure that the activities of these big Internet companies are compliant with EU law. What next? The co-legislators request the Commission to conduct a true evaluation of the newly established and comprehensive rules in the DCA in the coming years. The first evaluation report should be published as early as in November this year. This evaluation will be very important. A sound analysis of the issues at stake and of the functioning of the available tools is needed before we embark on a revision of very recent legal acts. President, honourable members, Commissioner, protecting our citizens online is our duty and requires continuous efforts to be able to guarantee our democracy and fundamental rights in the digital world. These efforts must be made in full synergy and cooperation with the digital platforms, which have a decisive role to play, but also with our partners globally. I can assure you that the Council's full commitment to preserving and defending our values. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schwabka. And now for the Commission, Executive Vice President Henna Virkkunen, 5 minutes.
Dear President, honourable members, democracies today face an increasing challenge from interference. And indeed, we have seen that social media is one of the vehicles used. We have seen it during the past years in so-called Doppelganger campaign, a Russian influence cooperation on Facebook and Instagram. We opened formal proceedings on that influence operation under the Digital Services Act. We have also seen it in the last month in Romania, where the Constitutional Court annulled presidential elections after declassified documents alleged the existence of coordinated manipulation campaign on TikTok. We opened formal proceedings on that against TikTok. These are extraordinary events in the history of European democracy. Democracy is a founding value of our Union. Free, fair and inclusive elections are at the core of democracy. Interference in elections requires a powerful response. The EU has the most advanced and powerful legal framework for online platforms, balancing freedom and responsibility, the Digital Services Act. The DSI defines clear responsibilities for all very large online platform providers that provide services in the EU. The platforms are obliged to conduct a risk assessment and to implement and effectively enforce mitigating measures, including on electoral processes and civic discourse. They are also subject to independent audits. Based on the risk assessment, platform providers may have to adjust algorithms, the design of their online interfact and content moderation systems to better mitigate these risks. It cannot be said often enough that the DSA does not censor content. It creates efficient mechanisms for the removal of illegal content defined by other EU or national law, such as illegal hate speech. Because what is illegal offline is also illegal online. But beyond supporting compliance with such limited prohibitions, the DSA ensures that anyone is entitled to express their opinion as protected under the Charter of Fundamental Rights. The DSA contains strong safeguards to protect freedom of expression on platforms' users. Transparency is a core principle of the DSA, giving greater agency to better inform citizens, civil society organisations and others in the DSA ecosystem. The DSA obliges platform providers to be transparent about their terms and conditions and to set out the main parameters that underlie their recommender systems. Transparency is vital precondition to accountability in democracy, where a fact-based debate is combined with the strong third-party scrutiny and cooperation with journalists, civil society organisations, fact-checkers and independent researchers. They play a crucial role in providing accountability and scrutiny of platforms' mechanism. In this context, the Commission has already opened cases against very large online platforms on publicly available access to data. The Commission is also preparing a delegated act on data access for researchers for the more far-reaching data access, which is consulted on with stakeholders in the last few months. Given the many elections taking place last year and this year, the Commission issued guidelines in April 24 for the very large online platforms and search engines on the measures they have to take to mitigate risks for electoral integrity. Rest assured, the Commission takes the enforcement of the DSA very seriously. We have already taken decisive steps. Since the entry into application of the DSA, 25 very large platforms and search engines were designated and no less than 10 proceedings were opened. 1 against X, 3 against TikTok, 1 against AliExpress, 2 each against Meta's Facebook and Instagram, and 1 against Temu. In one case, preliminary findings were adopted and 1 was already closed. Let me say this very clearly. The compliance teams are working at full speed. For example, in recent days, the Commission has requested X to provide internal documentation on its recommender systems and any recent changes made to it by 15 February 2025. We have also issued a retention order to X requiring the platform provider to preserve internal documents and information regarding future changes to the design and functioning of its recommender algorithms. And we have issued a request to access to certain X commercial application program interfaces, so-called APIs. These are technical interfaces to its content that allow direct fact-finding on content moderation and virality of accounts. It's important to note that strong and timely enforcement of the DSA requires careful detective work by expert teams, very solid evidence, and also decisions that stand up in the court. During my hearing, I said that I will make sure that we will double the number of colleagues working in the DSA by the end of 2025, to a team to 200 staff. The Commission does not work on the DSA in isolation, especially in matters related to election integrity, which require efforts both at the EU and national level and across institutions and policies. We work very closely with the digital services coordinators in the European Board for Digital Services, including through working group on integrity of the information space, and also directly with those digital services coordinators of member states which have upcoming elections in their countries. More generally, we also work with the framework of the European Cooperation Networks on Elections, bringing together national authorities dealing with electoral matters. The network will hold a strategic discussion now on 5th and 6th February on issues such as the equality of opportunities among political parties and candidates, elections integrity and risk management in electoral contexts. Honourable members, the DSA is a responsibility-based system. It provides for codes of conduct to help platforms to meet their obligations. This is why this week we assessed and confirmed the suitability of the Code of Conduct on illegal hate speech online under the DSA. This will strengthen the response against all illegal online hate speech as defined by different EU and Member States laws, so that hate speech flagged is assessed in 24 hours and removed if necessary. Focusing on the future, I'm also committed to move ahead with the assessment of the Code of Practice on disinformation with the view of issuing an opinion integrating also this code into the DSA framework. As a part of Code of Practice on disinformation, a broad range of signatories agreed on taking on the commitments and targeted measures to fight disinformation. Meta, Google, Microsoft and TikTok are already signatories of this code. In view of the threat that disinformation poses to our societies, I expect strong commitments from platform providers to continue implementing the code with appropriate measures to put this into the practice. When it comes to elections, the rapid response system under this code has proven to be very effective, showing the important contribution that independent fact-checkers and civil society can make. They can quickly alert platforms about time-sensitive content that can pose a threat to the integrity of elections. I count on the signatories and on the platform providers to make sure that this is applied to all upcoming elections. Dear President, honourable members, protecting democracy from the threats it faces today requires a comprehensive response. We are now preparing the new European Democracy Shield to address the most severe risk to democracy in the EU. The Shield will aim to combat foreign information manipulation, interference and disinformation. It aims to strengthen the EU's ability to detect, analyse and proactively counter threats. It will also address domestic threats to democracy. We do not start this work from the scratch. The Shield will build on the work already done on the European Democracy Action Plan and the Defence of Democracy package. Commissioner McGrath is leading the work with my close collaboration and working together also with other members of the College. Soon, we will launch consultations to shape up the upcoming Shield. I'm eager to hear the valuable contributions that the Parliament will bring to this very important initiative, especially the new Special Committee on the Democracy Shield. I want to assure you that the Commission is extremely committed to protect European democracy and civic discourse. The Commission is fully dedicated to use all the tools we have at its disposal to defend our democracies. I remain fully available to hear your views as we work together to achieve this common goal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Executive Vice President. Now we go to the first round of political group speakers, starting with the EPP Group, Andreas Schwab, 3 minutes.
Frau Präsidentin, Frau Kommissarin.
Madam President, Commissioner, Representative of Council. Thank you to Council and Commission for making clear that we have legislation on digital services, that we had it yesterday, we've got it today, we'll have it tomorrow, and it will be enforced. And I want to thank you for giving priority to legal certainty in the enforcement of the digital services legislation. For the EPP, what is important is that legal cases brought under the Digital Services Act be legally watertight. The Internal Market Committee in 2022 perhaps wasn't able to predict everything, but let me run through the objectives of the legislation: to secure freedom of opinion in the digital age, to protect personal data of citizens in the European Union. This covers social media platforms and broadcasters, and gives them prominence and publicity. The approach is complicated for the legislator to ensure, if we are to ensure that democratic debate on social media can be preserved. But this means that we have to enforce rules that we have had in Europe since before social media was invented. And in order to secure freedom of expression, it's important to have rules which are stricter than they were for newspapers, which ended up in the dustbin the following day. It's very every country has its own legislation. In 2019, the European Court of Justice decided that online platforms have to ensure that falsehoods are not spread. The platforms refused to do this. They challenged this. And we want the European Commission to continue with the procedures currently underway in order to guarantee that democratic debate continue in 27 different countries with 27 different sets of rules, so that in future in Europe we can say that we have democracy and plurality of opinion.
S&D Group, its chair, Irache Gracia Perez, 3.5 minutes.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Chair. We find ourselves at a crucial moment for the defence of our democracies. Not that long ago, it seemed that this was an opportunity for people to connect, to strengthen our societies. This was supposed to be a tool for progress, but today has become a dangerous weapon in the hands of those who want to divide us and to undermine our institutions. Electoral interference and manipulated algorithms on social media are a direct threat to our European values. Over the last few months, we have seen how Elon Musk and his social media network X has become a loudspeaker for the extreme right by supporting Trump and Vidal through hoaxes and messages of hate. We have also seen the decision of Mark Zuckerberg to get rid of the fact-checking programs in Meta, which is simply promoting lies and manipulation. In this situation, Commissioner Virkkunen, we need to think about what is the response of the European Commissioner. Where are the measures to end these abuses from the digital oligarchs? The silence of the Commission in the face of these threats is not acceptable. Inaction is not neutrality. It is means you are complicit in this. Of course, we welcome the measures announced by the Commission last week to get more information from Meta, from X, to finalise these open investigations, but we need to continue. We need to show that we are firm. We need to show leadership from the side of the EU. Citizens expect us to act. It's not enough just to legislate. We have to ensure that our legislation is effectively implemented. Our message to Zuckerberg and to others who think that social networks are above democracy is very clear. They are not beyond the law. And democracy is not simply something which can be brought. It is the essence of our social cohesion. The Digital Services Act gives us clear tools, including the possibility to levy significant fines. We need to promote European social networks, and we urgently need to adopt the directive on artificial intelligence. In 2022, the Council banned Sputnik and Russia Today in the European Union. We cannot now show double standards. There is no other alternative than to end social media networks that do not comply with the law. It is important to remind digital oligarchs why we are the European Union. We are the European Union because we defend freedom of expression in its true sense. It is a pillar of our democracies. It is not a playground for manipulation and for hate. We are the European Union because we believe in the transformative power of truth and democracy. We're the European Union because the freedom of expression does not mean the freedom to spread disinformation. Freedom of expression does not justify lies which destroy society or hoaxes which perpetrate divisions. History has shown us time and time again the dangers of propaganda and manipulation. It was not so long ago, and it could happen again. Ladies and gentlemen, we have these tools available to us. We have the responsibility to protect our citizens. The truth is not something that can be negotiated. Digital magnates need to understand the words of the poet Antonio Machado. The truth is what it is, and it will continue to be so, even if you believe to the contrary. Thank you.
Now, on behalf of the PFV Group, Virginie Geron, 1.5 minutes.
Présidente, Commissaire, Monsieur Schlappa.
Madam President, Commissioner, Mr. Schwabka. Here we are talking about the Digital Surveillance Act, which many want to use for political ends. Elections in Romania, disputed elections in Georgia, elections in Germany, Denmark, and elsewhere. It's all about sowing panic. As Thierry Breton said, what we did in Romania, we could do in Germany. Strengthening the DSA and the Democracy Shield, banning TikTok and X. But nobody was worried about the media campaigning for Macron. People seem to have a problem with Musk. That says a lot about what we've become. An ossified continent frightened of power. Rotten to the core and incapable of admitting defeat. That's your problem. This idea of strengthening the DSA has nothing to do with enhancing the rights of consumers. It's about control. But with the patriots in power, we'll have innovation. And I urge the Commission not to cede to the demands of bad losers. Thank you.
Adesso per il gruppo ICR.
And now for the ECR, Nicola Procaccini, 2 minutes, and happy birthday. Thank you, President and Vice President Verkunen. Thank you for being here. This debate comes at an odd time. Listening to the left and my socialist colleague just now, you are feeding this suspicion. My suspicion is that the loss of political dominion on social media is driving the left crazy at every level. You had suffocating control over political debate through the social networks, and you decided who could speak and what they could say. And then you didn't feel the need to have a debate like this one. We, however, Conservatives, did feel the need for this debate, and we felt the need for a tool such as the DSA to protect, first and foremost, minors from the dangers of the internet. But now what we're seeing, the vast majority of us voted in favour of this. We did not think it was right that Twitter could close the account of the democratically elected President Donald Trump and leave Ayatollah Khamenei tweet to the world. We should have had a proper judge to decide whether who should be decided from who should not have freedom to tweet, not just a fact checker. We know that we can only find truth if we have open debate and hear from different opinions. This is something that always has to be debated, both online and in the real world. The DSA is a tool. It has to be used correctly, avoid any prejudice, abuses, and avoid imposing a single type of thought. We're 100 years from Alexis de Tocqueville, and yet we're still seeing the same old story. We are in favour of freedom, and you are on the other side.
Renew Europe Group, Sandro Gozzi, 1.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Il fut un temps pas si lointain.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. Our strategy has been relevant and innovative. We have seen that we were right to be suspicious. X is not playing by the rules. Meta has done away with fact-checking and so on. The European Commission clearly needs to act, not tomorrow, but now. I listened closely to you, Madam Vice President. You need to enforce the DSA strictly, resolutely, without compromise. And then Musk, yes, he's maybe a genius, but he's also someone who's bought himself enormous power. By running X and becoming a member of the Trump administration, he is exceeding limits. In Europe, our rights and freedoms are not at the service of ideological servants, and the law applies to everybody. The situation is serious. Illegal content, manipulation of algorithms, systemic risks. It's clear. This is not a time of everyone for themselves. It's time to be bold as Europeans. Thank you.
Now for the Green Group, Alexandra Giese, 2 minutes.
President, Executive Vice President Virkunen, colleagues, the tech oligarchs are assaulting our democracy. Elon Musk is interfering with elections in the US and in Europe, enhancing the visibility of his own account and of far-right accounts, flooding everybody's timelines with the content of his choice. And that's a choice of a guy who yesterday at the inauguration chose to make a Nazi salute. Mark Zuckerberg's algorithms push hateful content and foreign propaganda and disinformation. And as the whistleblower Frances Hogan told us, that is not what people like, what people choose. It's what they engage with because it makes them angry. Executive Vice President, 10 days ago, you still told German media there was no proof for Elon Musk interfering with the algorithms. That is true, but that's the great thing about Europe, about the DSA and your job. You are the one who can prove it, and you're the only one in the world who has a legal basis to build a sound, court-proof case. After weeks of silence vis-à-vis the attacks by Musk, Zuckerberg, and Trump, now you need to go strong and fast. And I have 3 measures that I would propose the European Commission now takes. Urgent investigations in all relevant, very large online platforms to identify and stop the mechanisms that lead to disinformation spreading so much faster than information. Second, we need to protect elections right now. And there's a very easy solution to stop this manipulation. Stop the recommender systems. Let people choose the content they want without Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg imposing the content of their choice on people. And 3, we need to send a very clear signal that the EU supports better social media that cannot be controlled by tech oligarchs. For example, Mastodon, for example, the initiative Free Our Feeds, and many others out there. Colleagues, we have seen the tech oligarchs yesterday standing behind President Trump. They will not stand down with their enormous power, their enormous wealth, control over information and networks, use of artificial intelligence, the willingness to ignore rules. They will never respect us if we don't stand up to them. You have the choice. Kneel in front of unelected tech oligarchs or use the DSA to fight for the citizens who actually elected us. I have my choice. I will.
Thank you very much. Now for the left group, Carola Rackete, 2 minutes.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a few days ago, we were in a dystopia with lies. We had the head of the AfD in a discussion with the head of Elon Musk saying that Hitler was a communist. We're talking about a Nazi regime that murdered thousands of communists. But the fundamental problem is that X simply doesn't have the right kind of moderation in place, and the algorithms strengthen the far-right contents. In Germany, we need to act. We need to bring forward this AfD ban. We also expect the Commission to act strongly against any kind of hate speech on the social media platforms. We need to use the tools of the DSA. Germany will have elections shortly, so the Commission really needs to be decisive against X to stop any kind of disinformation being spread or foreign interference in our elections, whether it's from Musk or from Russia. The Commission has the possibility to put fines in place if there is problems with moderation. Brazil has shown us the way. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, but he has made Twitter into a propaganda platform. Now he is working together with Donald Trump to put in place cuts in the American government. Somebody who has violated American democracy. Trump himself talked about not needing any further elections. He wants to dismantle democracy. If the EU acts in the same way as the Biden administration, if they are too slow and too cautious, do not use all the legal options available, then the result will be more anti-Semitic, more anti-Muslim content, more anti-women content. Our democracy must be defended. You are responsible for that. Thank you.
Now to the ESN group, Milan Urik, 1 minute.
Liberálni kolegovia, prosím vás, nerobte z ľudí na
Liberal colleagues, please understand people on social media are not daft and don't pretend that you're defending democracy by introducing censorship. Do you know about Ahmed Haikel Ghaffar, a Muslim? He's responsible for fact-checking in Germany. What sort of independence does that guarantee? The owners of social media, like Mark Zuckerberg, say that they're under government pressure to censor.
Okay, that you cannot say, Mr. Ulrich. I have to cut your microphone now. Okay. I'm sorry, no matter what, you do not tell your colleagues to shut up, even if you disagree. I will give the floor to your next colleague. Next one is Pablos Arias Echeverria, 1.5 minutes. Because you said shut up. You cannot say that, Mr. President. When they will do the same, I will cut the microphone for them as well.
Presidenta. Thank you, President. Vice President of the Commission. With the arrival of the new US President, we'll see how the digital giants are going to play. Today, the digital platforms have a huge number of capacity and users and have undeniable influence. They represent a new type of communication in our societies and a new way of getting information. We can't allow there to be no limits, or no limits other than the interests of the owners. The European Union has clear limits. As the Vice President Verkunen said, these are based on transparency and protection for freedom of expression, as well as fighting disinformation. The Digital Services Act does not regulate content or censor opinions, but does establish limits to protect our values, our democracy, our citizens' rights and competitiveness for our businesses, ensuring legal certainty for all parties. But it also provides clear responses to foreign interference and illegal content and interference in election processes. This DSA must be respected. The platforms have to take on their responsibility and meet their obligations under the DSE when it comes to content moderation. We also want to see strict compliance with our legislation when it comes to proof and judicial investigations. This will help to strengthen our democracy, our credibility, our trust, and the laws that we have must be properly respected. Thank you.
Card, will you take it? From Mr. Vandenberg. Mrs. Vandenberg. 94.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. I'm very happy to hear you say that we should be strict on the DSA, but don't you think that this commissioner should present more concrete, more direct and more immediate and binding measures to safeguard our democracy against the foreign interference, and especially now? Can we agree on that?
Thank you for the question. I think the Commission has provided a clear response when it comes to interference from certain platforms or their users. And so I think that this has been clear and that the Commissioner is giving a response. This has to be based on proof. Member States have to take illegal content to the Commission. Commission will compile the necessary evidence and to provide a response where appropriate. Thank you.
5 minutes.
When we saw Musk walking into the Twitter office with a sink 2 years ago, did we expect that things will be escalating this quickly? It is sinking in that tech billionaires going rogue, posing an existential threat to democracy in Europe. Meta's Zuckerberg has joined in and urged the newly inaugurated Trump to force the EU to roll back European rules. We cannot accept these provocations and interferences with democratic processes when Musk uses X to support the far-right AfD and algorithms are tweaked to spread disinformation in the process. The silence from the European Commission and the lack of appropriate reaction have been deafening. In this game with bullies from the other side of the Atlantic, we must show strength and determination. We would be making a fool of ourselves if, after spending the last 5 years creating a digital acquis, we did not even sovereignly enforce the common European rules when the first difficulties arise. Investigations have been launched into X and other platforms, but none have been concluded. We have penalties up to 6% of the global revenue, but to be credible, these should be applied more swiftly. The announced Commission's democracy shield looks ridiculous if we didn't apply existing European rules. Besides defending fact-checking, we should also invest in fact-telling. We cannot rely on US tech oligarchs to provide us with platforms for trustworthy information. We need to invest in alternative digital infrastructure in Europe, a Eurostec with an EU-made and democracy-proof alternative for social network platforms. European citizens deserve a safe digital public space where quality journalism can find its place.
Out of time. I give the floor now to Tom van den Driessen, 1.5 minutes.
President, colleagues, the European Union is trying to teach the whole world a lesson about democracy, but itself is hardly a good example when it comes to censorship. With the Digital Services Act, we're trying to work against disinformation and hate speech, but we're not listening to the democratic claims of our citizens. When Elon Musk spoke to the AFD, the EU employed 150 civil servants to see whether or not this should be allowed. But what about Thierry Breton? The opposite occurred. When we saw the results of the elections in Germany, he said that we would have to look at the Digital Service Act to see whether or not this would be allowed. The same is happening in Romania. So what happens is with this disinformation, what they mean by disinformation is that somebody else has another opinion. And this just means that the left wants to stay in power and that they don't like hearing opinions that they disagree with. Freedom of expression is a fundamental right in the European Union, and we should not give that up. Thank you.
Hold on. Hold on. Mr. van den Driessen, there's a blue card for you. Would you like to come back for it? Stakis. Mr. Stakis.
So my question was what more American and Chinese platforms should do to continue to undermine democracy in Europe. Should they eliminate fact-checking entirely, or promote hate speech more aggressively, or maybe interfere more bluntly in our elections, or design algorithms that expose our children on harmful content? Perhaps Elon Musk, who allegedly gave Nazi salute twice yesterday, can convince you that it's time for strong and decisive action to stop these unhinged tech oligarchs. Thank you, sir.
Het zal u misschien verbazen, collega.
Well, it might surprise you, colleague, but truth should be protected. There is truth and there is lies. When you talk about the influence of in elections through external players or techno platforms, we have to say, let 1,000 flowers bloom, as Mao would have said. I just think that we have to trust in our citizens' opinions. Everyone should be able to free to give their opinion. Everyone has the right to hear different opinions as well. Shadow banning, that's what you're doing. You're trying to prevent people from hearing messages that they might otherwise not hear, and I don't think we should be doing that. Thank you.
1 minute.
Szanowni Państwo, kiedy Was słucham, to nie mam wątpliwości.
Clearly, democracy and freedom of speech in Europe are under threat, but not for the reasons the left are giving. You want to play Big Brother. You want to play the censor who will decide what is the truth and what isn't. What we're talking about here is how you want to introduce preventive censorship that we had in Eastern Europe in the communist era. Now, apparently, you don't want people to be able to decide on the basis of facts what is and isn't truth. Today, we're talking about the need for free social media, free of censorship and free of your solutions. You think you know better what is the truth, but the citizens can tell what is the truth as long as you let them.
Can you take a blue card, please? From Ms. Gregorova.
Yes, thank you. I feel really strange hearing all of this from especially this side, so you will be the one to take my question about it. I feel like you did not read really the essay which we are discussing today, because you talk about censorship. Can you explain how legislation which makes the influence of a few chosen ones on our minds and life transparent, how is censoring anyone? The only ones who need to be a little bit more upfront and open, so more transparent, are the big owners of the big tech, such as Mr. Musk. So can you tell me why Mr. Musk's freedom of speech, so-called, on a platform which he owns, is more important to you than what your citizens and what your voters know? Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Dziękuję za to pytanie i ono jest bardzo trafne.
Thank you. Thank you for that interesting question. Let me explain what I'm afraid of. The European Commission has not revealed any information about what it did in relation to preventive censorship of X. I've asked them twice, and the Commission doesn't want to answer me, and I really want them to answer me. Secondly, the DSA in the hands of this European Commission is going to be a kind of preventive censorship, because you want to decide what is bad content and what is good content.
1 minute.
Ja, dass wir Meinungsfreiheit haben, merkt man.
Well, we can certainly observe freedom of expression here, even if the interventions are somewhat fact-free. The DSA is not a tool of censorship. It is a tool to implement our legislation, to stop illegal online content and stop the influence of autocratic regimes and those who want to undermine our democracy. So it is unacceptable when the new US Vice President makes the statements he does and does not want to stick to the legislation. Trump's presidency shows how weak we are, but rather than look across there, we should look at our own situation. We see growth coming from China and the US, but we are there for regulation. So we need to ensure our interests prevail, but we also need to be somewhat pragmatic. We need to strengthen our economy. Thank you.
From Mr. Sell.
Yeah, sure.
Vielen Dank, Frau Hahn, dass Sie die Frage zulassen.
Thank you very much for allowing the question. Now, this is from the Charter of the EU Fundamental Rights. Each person has the right to freedom of expression. So that is the freedom to share information and ideas beyond state borders and without any government interference. So that is from the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. It is about our freedom of expression. That's a very important criteria for our democracy. So I am surprised that you, as part of a liberal party, would take the floor and speak in favour of censorship and restricting freedom of expression that goes against the values of the EU. Perhaps you should be in the left or the green group.
Gerade in Deutschland hat der DSA
The DSA has had an impact in Germany too. It has strengthened the freedom of expression. You can see that yourself. You can spout all kinds of nonsense because it's protected by freedom of expression. What we're talking about is illegal content which we do not want to see in our society. Thank you.
I give the floor next to Diana Ribay-Hiner, 1.5 minutes.
Gracias, President.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. You're not likely to hear my speech today in plenary on a social platform. And that shows the power that these platforms have and the power held by their algorithms on our day-to-day life. They have the ability to influence, to decide what you see, what you read, what you buy, perhaps, what you think, and how you vote. That is their business model. They keep us stuck to our screens with a formula that mixes disinformation, racist speech, anti-women's speech, and very reactionary discourse. These algorithms bombard us with content that seem to be taken from a fascist manifesto. This is how they fill the pockets of the big technology companies and undermine our democratic values. And behind them, you have the Tech Bro Club, who yesterday was sitting to Trump's right, using Nazi salutes without any concerns, and was openly supporting anti-European, anti-democratic political forces. We have to act strongly and have a clear message. Including here for the far right who are talking about censorship. In the EU, we have clear rules that must be respected. Anyone who undermines our democracy should have to face the consequences of that. We need to demand compliance with the DSA. This requires transparency and responsibility from the platforms. And this is fundamental if we are going to face up to this wave of populist and reactionary policy that is undermining all democratic safeguards. Thank you.
From Mr. Jungbluth, your colleague. He's from number 613. I give the floor next to Leila Shaibi, 1.5 minutes.
Il était une fois un milliardaire de la Silicon Valley.
There was a billionaire from Silicon Valley, a megalomaniac who decided to buy a very powerful social media network to build his propaganda. He wasn't elected by anybody, but he has a lot of political weight. After influencing the US elections, he's now attacking EU elections. Under the cover of freedom of expression, he is simply trying to push others to think the same as him. He is supporting the AfD candidate and attacking the British Prime Minister. How does the EU Commission react to this with a small press communique saying that our democratic values are fundamental? It is the lamb trying to fight the wolf, but the lamb isn't even trying to fight back. Commissioner McGrath, Commissioner Verkunen, what are you waiting for? To be devoured whole, you have to react. You need to impose transparency on X's algorithms, as the DSA allows you to do. And if they do not, then you should ban X for interference on our continent. It is high time to have a public European social network. The EU should not simply be an open bar for Musk and his buddies. If they want to be here on our continent, they need to respect our rules.
Now, Christina Anderson, 1 minute.
Thank you. Sie wollen also die Demokratie schützen.
So you want to protect democracy, and you think you can do that by regulating freedom of expression. The DSA, though, does not protect democracy. It is a desperate attempt to control opinion and to make sure that your disinformation remains unchallenged. Facebook, Google, X have had enough of fact-checking. They don't want to censor their platforms at the behest of governments, and you hyperventilate. That is an expression of what you're most afraid of, genuine freedom of expression. You are terrified of freedom of expression. You are worried that your power will be toppled. However, freedom of expression is a prerequisite for democracy, and so this appalling DSA must go. The emperor's fine new clothes only exist in places where there is no freedom of expression. With freedom of expression, the emperor is naked, just as you all are.
Like to take it? It's from Mr. João Oliveira. So, let's give the floor now to Fidias Panayotou. 1 minute.
Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, recently accused the European Union of institutionalizing censorship. Similar comments have also been made in the past by the owner of Platform X, Elon Musk. Dear friends, if these accusations are true, then we will have a problem, as millions of posts are being censored across Europe under the label of misinformation might be certainly unfair. Many times in the past, posts that were labeled as misinformation finally have turned out to be factually correct. We cannot have a proper democracy if we censor only one side of the story. According to Mark Zuckerberg, this happened with the US government during the COVID pandemic, as they forced Meta to censor things that were factually correct. The accusations of Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are very serious, and I believe we should take them into consideration. That's why I propose to invite them here to come in the European Parliament for a deep discussion on how we should moderate content.
Thank you, Mr. Panayotou. You have a blue card. Mr. Lagodinsky, will you take it? Yes. Good. Sergey. Wait. 134, yeah.
Is it correct that you were able to end up as a colleague here because of your activities on social media during the election campaign, on TikTok and many other social media? Isn't it true that you haven't been censored? You are here. You have been awarded with a mandate by this European Union with the freedoms that we have. So what are other proofs that your activity has been censored?
Go ahead, Fidias.
Well, I'm not saying that everything is being censored. I'm just saying there are things that have been censored in the past, and it's proven in the US that the government was interfering to censor stuff. So we need to have a proper discussion and understand what is censored in Europe, because this accusation from these people that own these platforms that we institutionalize censorship are very important.
All right, Mr. Panayotou, thank you. Let's move now to Mr. Axel Voss, 1.5 minutes.
Frau Präsidentin.
Madam President, Vice President, it is clear that social media has influence on our legislation, our way of thinking, our behavior. If you remember the Arab Spring in 2010, 2011, we thought social media was going to bring transparency, democracy. 10, 15 years later, we have our backs against the wall, and now we are having to defend our democracies. Interference in elections is clear. The US, in Romania, maybe also in Germany. Now, it's all very regrettable, but we actually have to act. All of these social media platforms do not have the same intentions. We need to, first of all, acknowledge that freedom of expression isn't a fundamental right above all others. It is not without its limitations. It is equal, as it is in Germany, to other fundamental rights, and it needs to be in compliance with other rights. We need to tackle misinformation, disinformation. That does not fall under freedom of expression, anything that is criminal. So if this isn't fully covered by the DSA, this needs to be updated. The DSA is quite robust, but we need to also look at fact-checking and possible abuses. We need to look at algorithms as well. And why don't we have our own type of media? Thank you.
Next is Anna Caterina Mendes, 1.5 minutes.
Colleagues, this is a war where blood is not being lost, but democracy is. We're seeing regular attacks against freedom of against individual freedoms under the false flag of freedom of expression. We have to ask that the European Commission should ask and ends its silence. We opened an inquiry, but there needs to be consequences for all of this. What are we talking about here? We're talking about these oligarchs' objectives, the owners of these platforms who, once again yesterday, as we heard from Elon Musk, their objectives are very clear. They're trying to sow division, take over our institutions, and sow the seeds of false information. Colleagues, here, we can't respond on a case-by-case. After this plenary debate, we have to be stronger in strengthening our democracy and demand that the Commission acts to be sure that the European Union's values are protected. To ensure that after 75 years, these values are strong and that we defend our democracy. Thank you.
Take it from Mr. Oliveira. Go ahead.
Obrigado, Presidente. Senhora Deputada, o espaço...
President, Madam Deputy, the media and communications is too important a space when it comes to proper functioning for democracy. Are we talking about ensuring that democracy can work properly? One of the measures on the table is about looking at content. So my question is as follows. Does disinformation come from lack of information because there isn't proper education in the media? Here, hate can grow in the dark. We have to foster citizens' critical thinking and their ability to ensure that they have the proper level of teaching and education about this. What's your opinion on that? Thank you, Mr. João Oliveira. I agree with you. Today, we have to ensure that we deepen our democracy, and I have no doubt that the best way of doing that, as we've heard, there's no better tool for democracy than in education, in citizenship and our values. However, we shouldn't forget about the legal tools that already exist in the EU that we have available to fight disinformation, lies, manipulation and interference in our democracy.
Now it's Kamila Gasiuk-Pihowicz, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Freedom of expression is not the same as spreading lies on the internet with impunity. freedom of expression does not mean disinformation. You cannot take people's right of vote away from them and interfere in democratic elections. This year, 30 million Poles are going to vote for their president. The decision has to stay in the hands of Poles and not with TikTok and Meta. We've had totalitarianism and dictatorship before. And that's why we can't allow Musk, who supports Germany's right-wing extremists who think Poland caused the Second World War, to push us into a new axis of evil through his algorithms. We fought for free elections. We know what censorship is. We don't want it back. We cannot tolerate widespread lies and disinformation on social media. Mr. Zuckerberg has ended cooperation with independent fact-checkers in the USA. That is an incentive to those who want to spread violence and hate. Those who practice it must know that they will not be allowed to do so. We will not allow it. Vice President Virkkunen, I'm sure, will fully implement the Digital Services Act and make clear that those who do business in Europe have to respect our principles and values. European democracy is not for sale.
You have a blue card. You have a blue card. Will you take it, Mr. Boschensky? All right. Now, next is Christel Schaldemose. Vice President, you have the floor for 1.5 minutes.
Dear colleagues, the DSA is a very good law. I know it because I negotiated it on behalf of the European Parliament. In that law, we have found the right balances between, at one hand, we have extremely big freedom of speech, but on the other hand, we also have some responsibilities. The platforms, they need to take responsibility for their algorithms. And if there is a systemic risk against democracy, then they have to risk mitigate. But we are in fact not saying how they should risk mitigate. It's up to the platforms, but they have to risk mitigate. So what we need now is that the EU Commission start looking into what is happening on the platforms. And therefore, I was very happy to hear you, Ms. Virkkunen, today, telling us that you have started trying to enforce the law, because I think that we really need to see some results. I am fed up with the side that's saying that we don't have freedom of expression. We have never, ever in the history of the Western countries had a chance to speak so freely as we can now. But what we need to avoid is foreign interference into our elections. We need to make sure that we have a balance in place so people are not bullied, and we need to make sure that kids are not seeing murder, suicide, self-injuries, etc. And that's why the DSA is a good law. But it's not better than the way it is enforced. So I really encourage the Commission to come up, speed up the process, so that we can show people that we have a good law and it can be safe and good and free to be online. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hold on. We have a blue card. Will you take it? From Mr. Jungbluth. 613. Bitte.
Sie haben gerade gesagt, dass die Meinungsfreiheit.
Thank you. You said there's never been as much freedom of expression as now. Do you know what's happened in Germany? In Germany, if you call a German minister hopeless, you have to expect the police will knock on the door and search your house. The slightest criticism of politicians in Germany leads to this. So how can you say that freedom of expression has never been so good?
It is possible for everyone in Europe to speak freely, and it has never ever been easier to express your own points of views online, on social media. And if somebody is taken down, it's not because of the European laws or German laws, it's because the way, for instance, Facebook has decided to have their community standards. It has never ever in the history been easier to say what you want, come out to so many people with such a small effort. That's a fact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor now to Mr. Demeter.
Köszönöm, elnök asszony.
Thank you very much, President. We should talk about specifics. Mark Zuckerberg has confessed. It's a proven fact that Facebook did censorship for political reasons under pressure from the Democratic administration. The dirty work was done by fact checkers. The pretext was the fight against fake news. The Patriots Group initiated a separate debate on this, but the EPP Liberal coalition blocked it. They blocked it because they are the very beneficiaries of this censorship. How absurd that in America the fact-checkers are being chased away, but in Europe they continue to operate. In fact, they are putting the possibility of censorship into further legislation on the grounds of combating pseudo-news, of course, or fake news. Incidentally, in many places in Europe, fact-checking is carried out by organizations that are supported by American left-wing circles, and the European Commission is getting involved in the funding. Why? They are not just censoring politicians, they are censoring voters, tens of millions of people who do not want immigration, who are fed up with ideological madness and who want Europe to stand on its own feet. The election results are clear. Wherever censorship may be sneaking in, this voice can no longer be silenced. Please.
Recent, într-un interviu, Thierry Breton a...
In an interview recently, Thierry Breton said, what we did in Romania we'll have to do in Germany if necessary. The DSA is not really about protecting consumers. It's a totalitarian measure to impose censorship. The DSA clearly has a hidden agenda to interfere in elections and endanger democracy. The DSA is a totalitarian measure that should be done away with through the courts. The people of Europe reject this new feudalism.
Yes, I mean, in Romanian, there was a problem that with the elections, that your secret, the Romanian Secret Service highlighted, and that was that TikTok had labeled all competitors for the election as political content, and therefore was suppressing that content, was keeping people from seeing that content in great numbers. While there was one candidate, the far-right content, that TikTok had decided not to label as political content, and therefore it could flood everybody's timelines. So you know that TikTok is a Chinese company. Do you think it's correct that a Chinese company that reports to the Chinese government decides which kind of political content the citizens of Romania can see? Is that freedom of speech for you? Foreign Chinese influence. Thank you very much.
Bun, nu sunt absolut deloc un fan.
Very well. As far as I'm concerned, you could ban TikTok in Europe tomorrow. But there is no evidence of interference by a state actor. There are just some information notes, some memos. There is no actual proof. I don't think you read the Romanian press. There's a Romanian party in power that was behind the interference.
La libre communication des pensées et des opinions est...
Freedom of expression is one of our most valuable rights. All citizens can speak and write freely, apart from abuses of this freedom of expression, which are determined by the law. We have this already in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and now in the DSA, those are held accountable who abuse this right. Europe is a land of freedoms, but it's not the Wild West where everyone can do what they want. We cannot simply throw democracy to the side or to manipulate the truth. If we listen to what Anna Arendt said in the last century, it is not about making people believe a lie. It is very important that the people can distinguish the truth from lies. Otherwise, you cannot distinguish good from evil. And with such a people, you can do anything. We have rules and they need to be applied, whether it's TikTok, Meta or X. It's the same for everybody, even the richest man in the world. Freedom of expression is sacred in Europe, and so we will not confuse that with the right to hate speech or manipulation.
Hello? My question is, where do you draw the line between disinformation and truth? And who is about to judge? Thank you. I love you.
Dear Fidias, my question goes to you. A lie is when you go on a mission observation of election in Georgia. You see massive frauds, you see a rigged election, and then you rush to your favorite social media to say that everything was okay and that this election was perfect. This is precisely what you did. And you were even able to do it because there is freedom of expression in Europe. But this is pure manipulation.
So, next is Dora David. 1.5 minutes.
A szólásszabadság alapvető jog.
Freedom of expression is a fundamental right, but let's not confuse it with the potential for false and misleading content to be broadcast and disseminated, which could influence election results. This is why the trend among the giant platforms, most recently Meta, to remove independent fact-checking is worrying, because fact-checking is not censorship. Even Mark Zuckerberg has admitted that there will be less bad stuff to filter out. This could clearly be a systemic risk that the Digital Services Act requires the platform to mitigate effectively. Unfortunately, we have already seen examples in the world of disinformation leading to violence. The removal of fact-checking is particularly worrying in countries where much of the media is controlled and regularly misled by the government. This was the case in Poland, and this is the case in Hungary today. Social media is therefore important and necessary, but removing fact-checkers gives scope for the spread of disinformation and could seriously damage democracy. This will not work in Europe. We have rules. It is now up to the Commission to enforce them. Please do so.
You take it? András László.
Képviselő asszony.
Madam, Mark Zuckerberg admitted recently that on political pressure, Facebook did censorship on the left from the United States and from Europe as well. And during this period, you were a leading lawyer of Facebook. You did know what was going on. So I have two questions. Number one, how did Facebook work censorship? Secondly, how can you identify people and content that was censored? Thank you very much for your questions. You have to ask Meta and not me. And talking about censorship, let's talk about the Hungarian media, because this is something which represents propaganda. Let me give you a few...
Ms. David.
Köszönöm. A cenzúráról beszélünk.
So we are talking about censorship. According to Hungarian figures, in 22 February, 400 cases were lost by Fidesz. And in 2000, 62% of the cases was lost. So there were lies, and they did censorship on the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, President.
In this unstable world, we need a strong Europe. We need to stand on our own 2 feet. And that is why, Commissioner Virkkunen, I ask you to be loud and clear on enforcing the DSA. Because types like Trump, Putin, Musk thrive if the EU is polarized, divided and therefore weakened. And we all carry their favorite weapon to influence us in our pockets and stare at it for hours a day. In Romania, we had to redo elections after foreign interference via TikTok. Musk uses his own platform X to promote one of the most extreme parties of Europe. And Zuckerberg is actively promoting his platforms as a place for hate against queers and women. A true free internet is one where not a small bunch of tech oligarchs, but our democratic institutions, and therefore the people, make the rules. Commissioner, make it happen. Stand up for democracy and enforce the DSA.
Thank you very much. Now, Tomislav Sokol, 1 minute.
Poštovana predsjednice,
Madam President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, the DSA must be enforced in an unbalanced manner, which means that both tycoons must be punished, which are hiding behind the USA, regardless of pressures from Washington. Otherwise, we are just vassals of the USA. And we have to treat both left and right equally. The fight against fake news should not be censorship, and this is why the decision by Meta to abolish fact-checking is important. But we have to wonder whether behind fact-checking is perhaps hiding censorship. We do not need the Ministry of Truth to tell us who to vote for. This is not the aim of the DSA. On the other hand, the European Union can decide on which laws to adopt, regardless of any pressures, even those from the USA.
Go ahead. 525. Go ahead. Hold on. 525. Your microphone. Yeah, go ahead.
Valdančiosios daugumos atstovė. Jūs matot, kad visam pasaulyje nėra demokratijos. Tik Europoje yra demokratija. Bet ar jūs...
Thank you. If democracy didn't exist, if it only existed in Europe, we have an Bolshevik dictatorship in Europe where any offering opinions does not exist. People who say there are only 2 sexes is judged. Perhaps you can answer how many genders are there, how many sexes are there?
Well, there are 2 sexes or genders, and this is completely clear. And I have always spoken against gender ideology. This is no secret, and we have to return to normality. We have to return to basic biology, and the rest is just pure ideology, which comes mostly from the left. So if you were thinking that I was going to say something different, you're wrong. So yes, fact-checking, yes, but ideological imposition of one's own opinion, no. Thank you.
Minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Libertad de expresión, sí, pero
Yes to freedom of expression, but freedom to lie or to spout hate towards women or migrants is something we should oppose. We have to raise our voice without double standards and send out a loud and clear message to say that you cannot touch our laws and that our democracy is not for sale. Because we're not between, the fight is not between censorship and freedom. It's between the technocrats, the oligarchs who yesterday who were applauding Trump are using manipulative algorithms to affect our lives with neoconservative discourse. This could be the pandemic of this mandate. We have a law, we have the DSA, but we need to act in 3 areas. First of all, Mrs. Vakuna.
Big tail that failed to comply with DSA, finishing the formal procedures soon and to impose exemplary sanctions, and to start developing now our technological autonomy, developing digital infrastructure and our own European social media platform. To our citizens, please be responsible and fact-check the information you use and share. And to Musk, Zuckerberg and company, in Europe we have a market of millions of users that provide money to your companies, yes, but we also love protecting our citizens and democracies by making laws. If you don't like it, you can always leave and take it or leave it. You can always take your Nazi salutes and your masculine energy and go back home. Viva Europa, hoy más que nunca. Muchas gracias.
Miss Laura, you have a couple of blue cards. Will you take one of them? Sanders Smith, 671. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, President. I just wanted to ask you, you once again reiterated false or too early claims that Mr. Musk made a Nazi salute yesterday. Defamation is also one of the rights, the protection against defamation is also one of the rights we have to protect in this House. So I would like you to distance yourself from your accusation that Mr. Musk made a Nazi salute. Let's await his explanation first before these left-wing groups make false accusations against a member of the US government. Let's lower the tone of the voice.
Ms. Ballarin, go ahead.
Bueno, una cabra es una cabra por mucho que lo niegue, señor.
Regardless of what you might say, we have to call a spade a spade. What we saw yesterday looked very similar to a Nazi salute. I can't say if it was or not, but what I would ask this chamber is that you react as quickly as possible to ensure that history does not repeat itself and that we are able to defend our democracy. Thank you.
The floor next to Elizabeth Deringer, 1 minute.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, geschätzte Kollegen.
Madam President, colleagues, and in particular I salute people who can form their own opinion, because the Digital Services Act is a worrying intervention in our freedom. Our freedom of expression is under threat. It is alarming that the DSA is to be strengthened, apparently in order to silence dissenting voices. Platforms are supposed to block content. This is nothing other than censorship. We don't want the EU to decide what we can see or read on the internet. The freedom of information is the very foundation of democracy. Let's fight together for a free internet. We don't need this kind of regulation.
Do you want a blue card? Will you answer from Mr. Oliveira? Go ahead, João.
Just a moment, please.
Obrigado, Presidente. Senhora Deputada.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I'll wait, Ms. Deringer. The extreme right say that those who control the media market should be able to use their power as much as they want, to leave everything to the market. And they say anything else is an attack on democracy. You can defend all that, but you can't say it's democracy.
Die Frage fehlt mir jetzt, meine Antwort.
I'd like to answer, but I didn't get the question. You are an example of someone who is afraid of freedom of expression, and that means I stick with my opinion.
Tsiodras, 1 minute.
Κυρία Πρόεδρε, κύριε Επίτροπε, αγαπητοί...
Dear Chair,
Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, the platforms and the social media are not just a simple medium of communication as we believed at the beginning of this century. They are now trying to move into our democratic processes and influence them. And we have powerful financial people that are trying to influence the public opinion in a lot of countries, and they're trying to keep people glued to their screens through their algorithms. But this power comes with great responsibility. Especially the big platforms need to do more about their algorithms, and they need to counter disinformation, as well as the fact that these algorithms are being used by third states. So the effective application of the DSA is what we have to do now, so that these platforms and the way they operate will be according to the European rules and values. Thank you very much.
Do you accept it? Yeah, please, Mr. Jungblut.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. I have a question. Now, you talk about how important fact-checking is so that we can maintain our democracy. In Germany, we have a corrective network that is responsible for fact-checking. And they lost a legal case against my party because actually they had lied and supported disinformation. So what is the situation where you have fact-checkers that actually are left-wing liars and using this as an excuse, saying that they're protecting democracy?
I don't know what exactly it is you are proposing. I mean, regardless, of course, anyone can express their opinion, but can they freely talk about data without any kind of fact-checking? And how can someone know what is true when he's on a platform? So there's a difference between opinion, and of course that is something that is an EU rule, and disinformation is something totally different.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Frau Sippel. Bitte, Frau Sippel. Für 1 Minute 30.
Mrs. Sippel for 1 minute 30.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Digital platforms, we see a dangerous alliance here between the these tech platforms and imperialists whose strength continues to grow. How open and pluralistic can a society be when we have these one-sided opinions and falsehoods which are spread? There is discrimination, hatred, threats of violence. We have these echo chambers which avoid pluralistic opinions. People do not reflect on their beliefs. This is something which particularly affects young people. People are constantly checking likes on social media, and this has psychologically damaging effects. There is constant tracking and profiling, which affects communication. It is for the profit of the few. It is time to end personalized advertising. The communication needs to act when it comes to the DSC, the AI, the GDPR. It needs to protect our privacy. It needs to be properly implemented. We are in favor of democracy and competitiveness, but we are against hate speech and exclusion. And those people who do not respect that have no room here in the EU. Thank you.
Is a blue card from Mr. Zelno? Then we come to the next speaker. It's Cavadagna, please. Stefano Cavadagna, for 1 minute.
Grazie, President.
Thank you, President. Here this morning in the chamber, I've seen that there has been an electoral turnover and with Donald Trump, and the only European leader who was present at the inauguration was Giorgia Meloni. But you can't say that, if you win, then democracy has flourished, and if the right wins, then democracy is in ruins. We have a commission who is looking at stopping interference from foreign states, which can be dangerous, and we all agree on that. But what we can't have is that freedom of expression is limited to only some people. The DSA was born with the desire to protect rights of minorities and of individuals, not to gag anyone who you don't like.
The next speaker is Irina Joveva for 1 minute, please.
Colleagues, I stand here astounded that we've reached a point where we must debate the enforcement of our own laws. The DSA is not an optional guideline, okay? It carries the full weight of democratic legitimacy, crafted with care to balance all interests and overwhelmingly supported here in this House and by the Council. Where lies our sovereignty if the enforcement of our legislation hinges on the decisions of foreign tech giants? They cannot pick and choose compliance based on convenience or leverage their governments to pressure us. Let me get this straight. The DSA does not oppose free speech. It protects it. Just like other EU laws, it ensures free speech thrives within the bounds of legality, because there are illegal acts that we, I hope, all recognize, child pornography, terrorist content, copyright infringements, and hate speech inciting violence. These are lines drawn by society applicable to everyone, regardless of faith or creed. And to those spreading disinformation about alleged EU censorships, I say this: take a big step back and you will still be able to legally lie and spread disinformation, but be aware that today's lie for political gain may be tomorrow's tragedy.
The next speaker, oh no, we have a blue card from Mr. Panayiotou. Do you accept it? Okay.
Hello. I will keep answering this. I will keep saying the same thing here, and please answer me with not a personal attack this time, but with an answer. Where do you draw the line on misinformation and truth, and who is judging? Thank you. I love you all.
Okay, thank you. I didn't do a personal attack just for, a report on you or on anyone else. I think that we need informed people for democratic society to function. And disinformation can only be destroyed by those who know how to distinguish it from the truth. And when the people will be informed properly and not trust manipulators, then we will be on our way to know also how to distinguish those things.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mark Buttinger, please, for 1 minute and 30.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Commission, Council. Today, the main problem is that a handful of billionaires control our information. It was already the case with traditional media, and now it's the case for social media. We can see the consequences clearly. For every post from one of my friends, there's 3 ads, suggestions to influence us, to manipulate us. The same with manipulated information that I see on Musk's social media network. So let's not talk about freedom of expression. When I talk about Palestine and they're not happy with it, then that's censorship too. We see manipulation of the ultra-rich. They do not want us to see how they act, how they avoid taxes while workers have paid a pittance. They steal from us. They make us sink lower. They make life harder for those already struggling. These algorithms manipulate us. These billionaires want to influence us. They want to buy elections when and where they can. This is the consequences of a liberal model which you imposed upon us. It's not just a few fines or this issue of censorship that's going to solve the problem. Democracy is a question of power. We are talking about property here. The internet was a breath of fresh air before it became the purview of just a few monopolies. It was meant to be something democratic, cooperative, collaborative. We need to take back control of our information. We need to have this European public initiative that is transparent and democratic. We need to free ourselves from these billionaires. Thank you.
Die großen Social-Media-Plattformen beenden endlich.
The big social media platforms are finally giving up censorship, and even Mark Zuckerberg is admitting that disinformation about that legitimate opinion about COVID-19 was repressed. Remember when Bill Gates and George Soros invested in the media? And where were you then? Germany has the most expensive media in the EU, and it's far from neutral, given that who it gives access and who it doesn't. The Digital Service Act is an attack on democracy. And when EU officials are monitoring our candidate for Chancellor, but there's nobody to guard the borders, then everything is wrong and the DSA should be abolished.
Ja. Von Mr. Gonzalez. Akzeptieren
Ja.
Sie die? Ja. Mr. Gonzalez, please.
Thank you very much. Ms. Member, I've seen your posts on the internet, and you seem someone that is often speaking about freedom. You are very worried about freedom. You are worried about the content that is being lectured in schools. When it comes to gender, you are worried about sexual and reproductive rights. You are worried about lecturing social rights in school. But you are not very worried when it comes to the internet or to the algorithm spreading lies to our children. So my question is very simple. Are you worried about science, or are you much more worried about the lies that are being spread by the algorithms that you protect on X and on Meta? Thank you.
Also vielleicht noch mal an den Kollegen.
I'm not afraid of science. I believe in data and facts, but I'm afraid of an EU which pays out money to media which has a single political opinion. I'm here because I want to fight for democracy and freedom in my country.
Kalinak, for 1 minute, please.
Vážení kolegovia, je mraz...
Colleagues, it's extraordinary to see how many of you are Democrats as long as you control information. You weren't worried about rich people buying up the media as long as they were your progressive globalist philanthropists. You didn't mind the influences in the media, but now you have a problem with Elon Musk. And Thierry Breton is saying that they're going to cancel the results of the German elections, just as they did in Romania. Where were you in 2014 when Soros was financing progressive Euro-federalists? You can spend hours pretending that the DSA is for people's safety, but it's actually for you to take control of social media, and that has nothing to do with democracy.
Do you accept it? No blue card. The next speaker is Magdalena Adamovic, please, for 1 minute.
Internet miał być oazą wolności słowa i dostępu do informacji.
The internet was supposed to be an oasis of freedom of expression and access to information without a hidden agenda. But the platform owners realized what a powerful tool it was. And now 3 people control the flow of information, the heads of X, Meta, and TikTok. In one fell swoop, they can introduce censorship. In one fell swoop, they can give free rein to the most awful content. Those 3 global oligarchs and their secret algorithms control what billions of people see. This isn't... the oligarchs thrive on chaos, and they try to fight the rule of law. Democracy must defend itself and bring their egos down. The world should be run by democratically elected people and not global oligarchs who think themselves above the law.
The next speaker is Raphael Glucksmann for 1 minute, and I want to say that those who have already had a blue card question should not ask another one, so that others also have the chance to ask a blue card.
Merci.
Please,
Madame la
Thank you. Vice President, colleagues. Europe is not a Chinese colony, and it will never be the 51st American state. If you want to operate in the EU, then you have to respect our laws. It's clear, it's simple. The Digital Services Act was adopted here in this chamber by a huge majority of members and by unanimity in the Council. But what is the point of having laws, as nice as they may be, if we don't have the courage to implement them? For weeks now, since the incessant interference from Musk in the UK, in Europe, all over, what are we doing? Here, there is a majority saying to the Commission, don't be afraid, publish the results of your inquiries into X and TikTok. Sanction those who violate our laws, regardless of how powerful they may be. We can't give in to power from the United States or from some European governments who have a similar attitude. We can't submit here. We have to stand firm, and that's how we will be respected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Zala Tomasic.
There are many disinformation circling about DSA. DSA does not stipulate what is an illegal content, and this remains in the primary competence of member states. DSA is mostly related to the harmonization of our digital market. Of course, statement about political censorship should be taken seriously. However, we can also see for ourselves that certain contents are favorized in social media. The European Commission must prevent such abuse and such political fighting, especially at national levels. Censorship and political favoritism are contrary to the European legislation and contrary to the DSA. Digital age by itself brings along a lot of novelty. Interference in elections is not something new. This has been present for several decades. What is new is just how easily things are done, how easily people can interfere in elections, and this is unacceptable. In many countries, in Slovenia too, we fought for democracy and fair elections. We will not, of course, yield from that, not even in a digital age. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sebastian Kreuz for 1 minute.
Ja, dank voorzitter. Ja, links is...
Thank you, President. The left is losing. Power is slipping from their hands, and the same goes for their mouthpiece, the traditional media. That's why they're panicking, and that's why for the 3rd time in 3 months today we're having the same debate. For years, people like Bill Gates and George Soros have influenced politics in Europe and beyond. No one's ever said anything about that. But now people with a different opinion are being heard on social media. And here everyone is up in arms because you say that Musk is wrong, so is Donald Trump, so is my party, and so is everyone else who isn't in agreement with the left. But the people are waking up at home. Thanks to social media, they're no longer dependent on the left liberal-leaning orchestra of suffering that they see every day on the television screens. That's why the left have had to take new weapons from their arsenal to try to shoot down any unwelcome opinions and to ensure that they inflict their only truth upon people at home. But any restriction on freedom of expression is a restriction on democracy. So that's what I say to the left. Stop stifling our freedom and dismantling our democracy. Censorship is not the solution to your demise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a blue card. Do you accept the blue card, Mrs. van Lanschot? Mr. van Lanschot.
Yes. U heeft het over.
You're talking about censorship, and my question is, have you actually read this legislation? Can you actually list one article where there is any censorship? Because what's set out in this legislation is that anything that is illegal offline should also be illegal online. Have you read it even a little bit?
Ja, ik wacht even het karige applaus af.
I'll just wait for the applause to finish. My point is that what we're talking about here in the Digital Surveillance Act is set out in the law. And the largest Dutch delegation here is the PVV, the Party for Freedom. And we believe that national member states should have more sovereignty. So we want to see more sovereignty for the Netherlands and for all the other European member states. And that's why we don't need to have all of this legislation coming from the European Parliament, which is just going to ensure more censorship and more limitations upon freedom of expression. And I can see that that's upset you.
The next speaker is Adam Bilan.
Niestety, ale słyszeliśmy...
Unfortunately, during this debate, we have heard attempts at diminishing the freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is a fundamental human right. Without being able to express your opinion, there is no democracy. Hence, there was censorship in totalitarian systems. Unlike most of you, I was born in a totalitarian country. I remember how much the communists were afraid of freedom of expression. That is why I listen with horror to the people in Poland's present government and EU officials who want to put people behind bars for what they write on the internet. The DSA was supposed to strengthen the position of citizens in a conflict with platform owners. It was not supposed to censor citizens. I am sure that the people of Europe will not agree with this.
Blue card, do you accept the blue card? Blue card, do you accept the blue card? Yes, then Mr. Juve from S&D.
Okay. Vous parlez de liberté d'expression et...
You talk about freedom of expression and censorship, but talking about conspiracy theories, as Musk did on his Twitter account, sharing false press articles constantly, saying without any proof that the media is spreading propaganda, putting out artificially intelligence-created videos to discredit candidates, as Musk did during the American presidential campaign, accusing the British Prime Minister of covering up child rapes, even though it is untrue. Is that what you mean by freedom of expression, or your freedom to lie?
Mówię o wprowadzaniu cenzury.
If you have a Digital Affairs Ministry in Poland, implementing the DSA, ordering that content on the internet be blocked. That's preventive censorship without the participation of the courts. This is in the Polish legislation. People will be able to appeal to an administrative court, but it's censorship because that content will be banned for months.
Vielleicht kommunizieren.
Perhaps I could just explain the rule for the blue cards again. If you're on the speaking list, you shouldn't be asking for a blue card because you've had the opportunity to express yourself. Secondly, it's a half-minute question and a half-minute answer. Please do stick to that. Now, we've been quite generous so far in this debate. There are still a lot of speakers and 1 hour till the votes. So I think we need to try and respect that and be a bit stricter on the blue cards and to focus on those people who are on the speakers list. Next, Dan Bana.
Eine Minute.
1 minute.
Disinformation and misinformation are more accessible than ever. The Romanian election campaign, 25 Facebook pages displayed 4,100 negative adverts about Elena Lasconi. There were 25 pages, 4,000 adverts, and almost 200 million people saw it. This is the power of a social network. And yet, this is at a time when theoretically there are control mechanisms to block fake news. Now, with Donald Trump and the internet moguls implementing disinformation as public policy, we're in a situation where tech oligarchs are going to control information in the world. The only way to fight this is through the rule of law. We need truth and we need to defend it.
Peter Aquis.
Colleagues, I'm very pleased to see a European Commission who is very active on these giants of internet. But I would like to see a Commission which is proactive. We have heard about the risks, but we need to also focus on opportunities. In Malta, we say that in politics you need to hear the two sides. But these algorithms give you more information than what you already know. They consolidate your thinking, and maybe can they give a variety of opinions? I would also like to emphasize the value of social media as opportunities for many businesses in Europe, which have grown. Activists also have now a community of social media. We can think about security, democracy, but the biggest red line is the citizens' liberty. Thank you.
Is Nicola Stefanuța. Please, you have the floor for 1 minute.
I listened to some colleagues, and quite frankly, quoting Zuckerberg, quoting Musk in this debate is like quoting the owner of Haribo on the benefits of gummy bears, you know? It's like platformele sociale.
The social platforms promise to connect us, but actually they separate us. Parents in one chamber, children in another, each in their own reality. It's the algorithms that decide what we see, what we think, and how we vote. And they amplify messages until they become viral. Extremism wins when falsehoods become visible and the truth is invisible. We saw that in Romania. We saw the how information was manipulated to change the results of the elections. Democracy is in danger, and we here have to defend it. And we can say to Musk that Václav Havel said that truth and love will prevail over lies and hate. Thank you.
Con mucho dinero y amenazas son ustedes.
You are the ones who have spent decades imposing your your dogma on universities, on media. Never in the history of Europe have we seen people being cancelled for what they think. And now using social media as a massive tool of censorship, having these fact checkers, having sanctions against Elon Musk for speaking the truth. This is all the proof of your failure. A state cannot deprive its citizens of life. They put forward politics that are incompatible with the West. There are things that would have got you cancelled on social media, policies that we have now in the States. Things you are offering poisoned pills to people, but they want bread, they want freedom, they want justice, they want their country. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Busade, you're saying... Qua. Lei dice che...
You said that the DSA is undermining freedom for our citizens and amounts to citizenship, whereas what we're asking for is that if there is any censorship that has to be done, then it has to be transparent. So we're not talking about censorship, but fact-checking. But these things happen anyway, because we already see that it's platforms who, through their algorithms, decide what we can see, what has to be deleted, what has to be cancelled. Are you okay with the fact that this power is in the hands of the platforms, so a few billionaires, not in the hands of this parliament where you reside? Do you think this is patriotism?
Cuando los multimillonarios...
When the multimillionaires were working for you, you didn't care whether it was Musk or Bezos or Zuckerberg or any of these. When they were on your side, you didn't care. But now they are fighting for freedom. You are concerned. Do not use the Digital Services Act to impose this censorship that you've already imposed on universities, on colleges, on parliaments. There is a part of this hemicycle that is not represented because you have zero respect for democracy. You are losing. I know it's been a difficult night for a lot of you, but don't worry, there's more to come.
The next speaker is Regina Doherty for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. As Timothy Snyder said, to abandon facts is to abandon freedom. In recent months, we've seen an election in the European Union suspended due to illegal content and manipulation of algorithms. We have US tech billionaires promoting far-right politicians in Europe and talking about taking down democratically elected governments in Europe. And now we see social media platforms reducing their oversight. Next month marks 1 year since we passed the Digital Services Act, and it will be all for nothing if national regulators, including Ireland, my own Commissioner man, don't have the resources that are needed to make sure that we bring it into full effect. So let's be very clear, this is not about controlling free speech. Instead, it's about ensuring that the voices, no voices, can be silenced or drowned out by incitement to hatred, deliberate misinformation or manipulation of algorithms. It's about protecting democracy online. It's about making the online space open to everybody, not just the highest bidder. EU regulators need to agree soon, now, not in 2026, on a common approach for age verification to protect our young people. And furthermore, platforms should be banned from making money, profits from criminals by taking ads for people who are purporting crimes. Europe faces vital elections next year, and we need to make sure that we control freedom of speech on all of our platforms.
Please respect the time because we have a lot of speakers. Katharina Barley for 1 minute.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Die Frage.
Thank you, Madam President. The content on the internet is the nature of the content on the internet is vital to our democracy. The right are talking about censorship. There are rules on the internet, but they're devised by American oligarchs and the Chinese government. It's the algorithms that decide who sees what. It's not democratic parliaments. It's not even you. It's the people I mentioned, and they call themselves patriots or nationalists. And American oligarchs, the Chinese government, and the Kremlin, those are the ones that are laying down the law. And if we here as democratic actors, we should be able to say, you cannot spread disinformation. The Kremlin, for example, you cannot spread this around the European internet. That is to protect our citizens, and something that needs to be implemented better by the Commission.
Nein, keine Blue Card.
No blue card.
Anna Brylia.
Pani Przewodnicząca, Szanowni Państwo.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, the Digital Service Act is a dangerous intervention in online content. It's censorship. Theoretically, it's supposed to protect users, but in fact, the truth could also be in danger if governments or local authorities decide it's a threat. Moderation mechanisms are arbitrary, and protection from content is being used as an excuse for control. You only need to look at what happened in Romania, where the presidential elections were overturned, and Thierry Breton wants to do the same in Germany. You are building a new Soviet Union in Europe. Are those your EU values?
The next speaker is Maravillas.
Muchas gracias. En un mundo.
Thank you. In a world where digital is difficult to separate from the real world, we have to ensure that we're not vulnerable. As elected members, we have to defend the European pillars, including in the digital world. When it comes to the digital arena, we have to ensure that we can protect our citizens' freedoms and also independence, avoiding algorithmic manipulation. Social medias have to protect freedom of expression for its users without being used by any foreign interference or any type of manipulation. We've seen how the shadow of doubt is being extended to a number of platforms that don't have the necessary level of transparency. That's why we have to demand the proper implementation of the DSA. Defending the European Union's digital sovereignty means defending our democracy and our freedom, as well as rule of law, against foreign powers who would like to bring down our freedoms, because freedom of information and expression are not just compatible with this regulation, but they will actually be strengthened by it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sandro Rotolo for 1 minute, please.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you, President. It's because we love freedom of expression that we believe that Mr. Musk is a danger to democracy, because he represents something new, the techno-populist. He's the richest man in the world. He's in politics. He has a monopoly, and he's questioning liberal policies and the rule of law. We know how important it is to fight against private monopolies to strengthen our democracies. It's not acceptable that through X, Musk can interfere in internal affairs of European Union member states. He's spreading hate, disinformation. The social media giants are using their platforms to fight for the American right and are spreading fake news. So we have to find out as quickly as possible whether X has violated the Digital Services Act. We have to fight for European digital sovereignty. That's the only way that we can defend our democracies. President von der Leyen, Europe cannot give in.
The next speaker on our list is Fernand Kartheiser.
Nous devons défendre la démocratie.
We need to defend democracy and fundamental rights. The European Commission interferes in elections, and on the other hand, there are those that defend the freedom and integrity of elections. The Digital Services Act needs to be reformed fundamentally. The best response to disinformation is not censure of freedom of expression. Michael Schaldenberger, the American professor, recalled this in his recent visit to the European Parliament. President Trump, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are showing us the way forward. In Europe, unfortunately, the worst is still to come. The EU Democracy Shield, a new project from the von der Leyen Commission, will continue to restrict our freedoms. The best shield for democracy will be the one that we put in place to protect citizens from the totalitarian tendencies of the European Commission. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Bart Groothuis for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. Promoting one political party during an election while suppressing others, or even rolling out the red carpet for Russian disinformation campaigns on a Chinese platform, it reminds Europe of its darkest hours. Yet, it has happened in Romania, yes, and it's happening in Germany. So no doubt what needs to be done, uphold and enforce the law. But if that means that over TikTok, China would limit our access to critical raw materials, or the US would limit its support to NATO, the nature of the game is changing. So then there can be only one response, to create European alternatives for social media platforms. But all of that will be unnecessary. Unnecessary if you, Commissioner, uphold the law and enforce it in the rule-based order we have, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. But please act.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Gaetano Pedulla.
Onorevoli colleghi,
colleagues, regulating internet platforms through the Digital Service Act is not enough. I've listened to Vice President Virkkunen, and I understand her strategy. But if we really want to take back ownership of our digital arena and manage information, then there's no other alternative but promoting new digital infrastructures which will be European. That's the only way to fight algorithmic manipulation and protect our freedom of expression. So yes, implementing the DSA is good, sanctioning any fake news, but to ensure proper information and democracy, then we have to urgently encourage pluralism for platforms, as well as pluralism on platforms. Europe has the technological and financial means. But if we don't create our own platforms, then we're going to spend years talking about Musk and Zuckerberg and how these techno-oligarchs are indulging in dangerous manipulation.
Stéphanie Yancourtin, for 1 minute, please.
Merci. Le DSA, oui, est un outil essentiel pour...
The DSA is an essential tool to guarantee that the digital space remains safe. However, it must be strictly enforced. Our rules that the representatives of 450 million citizens have decided, and which apply to all platforms which operate on our market, irrespective of their nationality. Whether Musk, Zuckerberg, and the other Trump whisperers like it or not, they want deregulation, they want to threaten Europe. Yes, everyone is free to think and express themselves freely, but a platform which becomes a tool for interference and the spread of hate ceases to be a social network and becomes a political weapon. There has to be a stop to disinformation and polarization. Enforcing the DSA is protecting European values and European sovereignty. It's very important for the European Commission to stay its course and to enforce the law and nothing but the law.
Now the next speaker is Eleonora Meleti for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Chair, Madam Commissioner. Dear colleagues, in the offline world out there, the freedom of one person ends where another person's freedom begins, because rights, democracy, are protected by laws. In the online universe, however, democracy is under attack in the name of democracy itself by those biased algorithms that give the illusion of free speech, but in reality they aim to manipulate public opinion. They aim at all of us. So we have these biased algorithms that manipulate us and tell us who to vote, what to believe, how to shop, how to live. So we have some people's freedom of speech that are infringing upon some others' people's rights. The EU saw the threat early on and adopted the DSA. This is a very promising framework for the protection of all of us. Now we have to convince these platforms to react. We are not a threat. We are not wagging our finger at them. We want safety and democracy and clear digital rights because, my dear colleagues, I'm sorry to say, if they don't follow us, the platforms, then this whole thing will end up like the safety instructions in an airplane. Everyone will nod along, and when the plane is going down, no one will do anything.
Juan López Aguilar.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, President, Commission, Council. Defamation, propaganda, all of these lies and hate and confrontation. This is not freedom of expression. It's not protected by the Charter of Fundamental Rights. It is the product of algorithms that are in the hand of oligarchs from the ultra-right, those who are waging war against our fundamental rights. We cannot bow to this. We cannot abdicate our responsibilities when it comes to this legislation. The Commission's job is to enforce our Digital Services Act and the Data Protection Act that offers the highest level of protection in the world. There are fines that need to be imposed on those who violate European rights. We need judges to impose restrictions on these digital magnates running this social media. That's something that Europe can do. We can put in place European social media platforms with transparent algorithms so we can have a worthy public debate with participation of our citizens. Thank you.
The next speaker is Susanna Ceccardi for 1 minute.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you, President. The right to express your own thoughts without fear is one of the great ideals of democracy. And Roosevelt, a Democrat, said this. In the last Parliament, myself and the Lega voted against the Digital Services Act. Rather than protecting democracy, the DSA, as drafted, is a key in the hands of European oligarchs. This regulation did not arise to protect citizens, but to control them and censor them. It's those who claim that it's for those who claim that they are fighting censorship, but actually want to gag people who speak common sense. Elon Musk is guilty only of having made X a platform that is free from any types of censorship or any type of ideology. And why are you against this new liberty? What we see is that the winds are changing. The dictatorship of the left is falling down across the world, but not in Europe. But Europe risks being subject to this. We now have a new European Soviet Union.
The next speaker is Sunčana Glavak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear Vice Presidents, dear colleagues. Today, in Goebbels mode, we've heard several lies, and that is that the DSA allows for censorship. So let me say once again, as a former journalist, the Act on Digital Services is not censorship, but freedom of speech does not mean the freedom of hate speech. I hope that we will all agree on that, both colleagues on the left and on the right. But let me warn against something else. We have to be careful with our words. We cannot speak about illegal hate speech or illegal or hate speech which is against the law. So it's either hate speech or it isn't. So let's be precise and try to avoid these mistakes which may happen perhaps in translation. As concerns the DSA, I think still that given our high standards of democracy, we must protect our democratic values. So let's not invoke lies, but let's invoke the truth, because truth always wins in the end. Thank you.
We have many people on the speakers list already who asked for the floor or are on the list of the political groups. I really ask you to respect the speaking time. And again, I want to remind that those who had already several blue cards or speaking time should not ask another blue card, just to give the chance to all the speakers to be heard. Thank you very much. The next is Paolo Insalvini. Sorry.
Perché avete così paura?
Why are you so afraid of freedom of expression? Why are you so frightened of other opinions and discussion? For years, digital platforms, under the pretext of fighting disinformation, have carried out censorship. We have spoken out about the disproportionate power of multinationals who influence people's minds and opinions. And what was the response from the left? Silence, or even worse, guilty support for those carrying out the censorship. Those who are behind gender ideology and the Green Deal, you just fell in behind them. Now we're seeing that there is a guarantee for freedom of expression. We're seeing, for example, the unfair annulment of the Romanian elections. You've stood behind propaganda for your own ideology. We're not frightened of debate. We know who we are, and we also know that truth always wins. As St. Augustine said, truth is like a lion that can defend itself. We need to liberate this lion.
The next speaker is Moritz Körner.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, Frau Präsidentin.
Dear colleagues, Madam President, freedom of expression is the foundation of our democracy. The DSA is not a ministry of truth. It sets clear rules and transparency. Having Musk and violate speaking together on X is not forbidden. It happened. I think, if anything, it showed her lack of competence in this discussion. But if Musk's content is always promoted automatically by the algorithm, then this is a problem. And that's where we need to look into these algorithms. When Zuckerberg says that he is going to work together with the administration against EU legislation, that is not acceptable. The EU needs to be clear there, but it is completely wrong that Zuckerberg does fact-checking with community notes. The DSA doesn't clearly state how fact-checking should take place. Now TikTok is run by the USA and China. We need to look more closely at innovation inside of Europe and not just regulation. Thank you.
Lydia Pereira, also for 1 minute, please.
Não querer a verdade é mentir com o pensamento.
If you don't want truth, then you are lying through your thoughts. If you confirm a lie, then you are lying. We should think about these words. These words might be, what we say might be virtual, but the consequences are real. The DSA will give transparency and credibility to the digital sector, and we cannot delay its implementation. The DSA respects individual freedoms and freedom of opinion. It ensures that digital platforms take responsibility when it comes to people who are trying to undermine democracy. Social networks cannot give up all responsibility, particularly when we see that there are threats to European democracy, and these companies are making huge profits thanks to these lies. When we see lies, we have to ensure that we are working for truth and protecting our liberties.
Céline Fourré, for 1 minute, please.
Chers collègues, je suis ici.
Colleagues, I'm here to condemn the Digital Services Act, the DSA, which supposedly fights disinformation, but actually institutionalizes state censorship at European level. It flouts one of the fundamental principles of our democracy, the freedom of expression. This principle used to be sacred, and the DSA wants to do away with it for good. The technocrats want to impose a single official truth. This regulation does not protect citizens. It infantilizes them. It takes decision-making power away from them. The EU demonstrates its fear of truth by increasing its toolbox of controls. This authoritarian drift must be stopped. People should have a right to express themselves freely without the institutions interfering. Thank you.
The next speaker is Marketa Gregorova.
Dear colleagues, imagine a platform where fake accounts and AI-generated content influence public discourse with precision. A platform owned by a foreign actor in close relation to their state leadership. A platform with algorithms engineered not to inform, but to provoke, amplifying the most divisive and negative reactions. A platform that dominates our digital landscape. Now consider a platform benefiting specific individuals during an election in Europe. What platform did each of you imagine? Was it TikTok or X? These parallels should be striking to us Europeans. Long gone is the time when social media giants just wanted to increase their profits. Now there are political motivations behind our feeds, endangering our democracies. Extremists will accuse us of taking their free speech rights while they are owning the main means of public communication. Don't act neutral. Standing in the middle between autocracy and democracy just means standing on the side of autocracy. Thank you.
Here is a blue card of Mr. Dostal. Do you accept it? Yes, please, Mr. Dostal.
Dobré ráno, paní kolegyně, budu mluvit česky, jsme Češi. Pokud vám vadí zahraniční vměšování...
You say that you are so concerned about foreign interference, but this Foreign Agent Registration Act that took place in the US, is that not something that is fair then? I think you're more concerned about the money associated with these activities and Trump himself.
Otázku. Ve skutečnosti tento legislativní návrh už leží v Evropě na stole. Připravila ho naše bývalá česká kolegyně.
We have made this legislative proposal and it was drafted by Ms. Jourova. There are those who would argue it is an anti-American piece of legislation, but there is a lot more to it than that. We have got to address a lot of the issues that arise in this context. I think that the legislative proposal is something we need to work on.
Sophia Kircher, for 1 minute.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, geschätzte Vizepräsidentin.
Thank you very much indeed, President of the Commission, Council, Vice President of the Commission, colleagues. Digitalization is critical to the way we live, we communicate, we work, and indeed not least how we get our information. It offers us many opportunities, but equally engenders many risks. Fake news, hatred on the internet endangers our very democracy and its continued existence. It also undermines trust in the media and trust in institutions. The DSA is a tool which we can use in order to optimize our opportunities and protect ourselves against risks. The European Union could be in the vanguard here. It is attempting to do this and to put in place guardrails against fake news and more. There have been concerning cases in the past, but the European Commission is currently focusing on and addressing these, and we will be able to strengthen our DSA protective shield so that we have an ever freer and more securely anchored democracy in Europe. Thank you.
Is Matthias Nemes.
Dear colleagues, yesterday we witnessed an inauguration of President Trump, and what we saw was something exceptional. At the forefront were the leaders of tech giants, so we know who has influence and who serves the capital. So it's not human, it's the capital that has all the power in the world. We also know that social media was a turning point for democracy and humanity. Social media are on the rise, and technological giants have even more concentration of capital and also influence. For example, the annulment of Romanian elections, interference in elections in Germany. This is all a hybrid war that is reminiscent of the tools that Russia is employing. We have actually set up very stringent standards for digitalization that is based on the values of the EU. So we need the Commission to act decisively against foreign interference. We also need to set up special rules on power concentration on the internet. If we do not do that, maybe we should really suspend the platforms in the EU. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Ermo Shalabaros.
Colleagues, let's call a spade a spade. In its current form, the DSA is a tool for political censorship. Mark Zuckerberg himself has admitted that right-wing political content was censored based on political pressure. In the United States, many have given in to pressure, but there is no law stipulating censorship there. And it appears that in the United States they've learned from their mistakes. It's not the case in Europe. I fear that the left wing in Europe has not learned anything. This DSA must be repealed in its current form. We don't need censorship in Europe. We need to spend that money on protecting the borders. Free speech and a level playing field need to be ensured. This is the foundation of our democracy. We need to say no to political censorship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tobias Bochinski.
Szanowna Pani Przewodnicząca.
President, ladies and gentlemen, it is you, people of the left, and you bureaucrats are destroying the freedom of expression, which is the foundation of European civilization. You are bold enough to tell us here today that Elon Musk is a fascist. He is the man who introduced unlimited freedom of expression on his platform. You don't see that what you're saying is illogical. You are introducing censorship because the freedom of expression doesn't need any control. Controlled freedom is not real freedom. Verification, community standards, these are propaganda criteria. These are censorship criteria. You don't see this. They are afraid of truth, afraid of freedom, and most of all, you are afraid of the fact that the member states and their societies will say what they think, because this will undermine your power, which you are protecting here, because you are not protecting freedom at all.
The next speaker is Bartłomiej Sienkiewicz.
Do prawej strony sali.
I'm addressing the right-wing parties. Please stop pretending you are all about freedom of speech. You are the party of Trump and Musk in the EU. Yesterday, you were applauding Trump, and you don't seem to be disturbed by the fact that this president of the United States is announcing a trade war that is going to destroy the EU economy. Today, you are defending the American internet platform, and you do not seem to be disturbed by the fact that their algorithms will be part of the American aggression on Europe. For me, as a Polish citizens, the support that the X platform is giving to AfD is an act of aggression in itself. And I'm very surprised by the Law and Justice members from Poland that they do not mind. If the European Commission cannot stop the X platform from interfering in the European politics, if DSA is going to be just a bit of paper with a bit of print on it, we are going to lose our sovereignty. And you, on the right side of this chamber, you are the traitors.
Much. Fabienne Keller is the next speaker, please.
Madam Commissioner, Minister, Madam President, this is the day following the inauguration of Donald Trump as president. This inauguration, we know, means great danger for our democracies, European citizens, and freedom of expression. It is precisely democracy and the freedom of expression that we wanted to protect when we voted in favour of the Digital Services Act. Unlike what the leaders of the big platforms X and Meta state, freedom of expression resides where any and all opinions can be expressed in full respect for one another. Deregulation gives way for hate speech, pornographic content, and terrorist, misogynistic and racist content. Let us not be fooled. Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are not defending freedom of expression. They just want to put forward their own ideology. Europe is not weak. Madam Commissioner, we do have the DSA to help us face down these threats. Let us apply this regulation rigorously so that we can force all platforms to respect our rules and, above all, our values, so that we can protect our citizens. Thank you.
The next speaker is Konstantinos Arvantis.
Good morning. Thank you. Dear Commissioner, if things are going so well, we wouldn't have all these troubles we've seen in Romania. But yesterday, we realized officially that we went back to 1935 based on what Donald Trump said. We have a God-sent theory revisionist and the person funding him, Mr. Musk. It seems that there's also people here, MEPs, who are willing to defend him, much more than they're willing to defend human rights. We see confidential documents, personal data, political algorithms can end up in the hands of the wrong people at any time, those who are planning political destabilization. Musk, the Chinese, Cambridge Analytica, don't forget about them, or anybody else. So it's crucial to see what we're going to do. We need governments and political leaders to examine into depth what we're going to do and how we're going to implement the DSA, and to continuously update legislation based on the new facts and new challenges. When the history repeats itself, it's usually as a farce, and we saw what happened in 1935 with Hitler fans and Goebbels, and today it might be repeated in a different way.
Hennig, for 1 minute, please.
Podczas gdy Donald Trump while Donald Trump is decreeing to limit freedom of speech, the EU is lagging behind. You want to destroy the political competition, and if you don't like a certain government, you just want to get rid of it. You want to deprive people of the basic freedom of expression. Why? Because you're afraid of it. People can see that you are cheating, that you're stealing, and you are afraid of the fact that people write what they think about you directly. For you, democracy is when people tell what's on their minds. The right-wing and conservative ideology is supposed to be a crime. And today's debate should be called the need to strengthen censorship to protect those who are in power in the EU. If you are not, if you don't like X or other social media, simply log out, leave it. Nobody forces you to use these platforms or these social media. And these social media are in favor of real freedom of expression. And everybody will be happy this way.
Barry.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. We are at a critical moment when it comes to both protecting our democracies and citizens in the digital age. Many social media platforms, which once served as tools for connection, are increasingly becoming hubs for disinformation, exploitation and harm. This isn't just about protecting democracy. Anonymity is being weaponised in other ways. Catfishing, where predators create false identities online, devastates lives, exploiting vulnerable individuals, including children. The Digital Services Act is a bold start, but we must go further. As this isn't about eroding the right of anonymity, it's about ensuring platforms can verify real users to deter fake accounts used for harm, protect children and vulnerable individuals, and build a digital environment of trust and accountability. The time for decisive action is now. Thank you.
There is a blue card from Renew for you. Do you accept the blue card? Then I give the floor to Mr. Verhofstadt.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I share many of your views, but you and many of the members here, last week...
Interpretation?
There is interpretation. Can you hear interpretation? The English interpretation is available.
Do it in English? It's
yes.
okay for you? Okay. Yeah. Last week you received an email, like everybody here in this hemicycle, asking for Elon Musk to be a Nobel Prize candidate, coming from the EPP. And my question is, how is it feasible, or what is your opinion in regards to this demand? Is it normal that for EPP, or for the group, do you support that initiative? Do you think it's normal to have someone making some ingerence, disinformation, and supporting having abnormal words against the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and making all this disinformation, which would be a candidate for a Nobel Prize? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, but what I'm trying to say is I think we should really put pressure on the platforms to make sure there's verification identity. And I think this would solve a lot of problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Hannes Heide.
Danke, Frau Präsidentin. Thank you very much, President. Every individual has a right to freedom of expression. This is enshrined in the CFR and also in the constitutions of every member state. Freedom of expression is the core of every liberal democracy, and this is what differentiates us from authoritarian regimes such as Russia or China. It ends, though, where criminal law begins. These big platforms cannot simply shirk their responsibility when, for example, they publish posts denying the Holocaust, promoting anti-Semitism, which lead to violence, and when they glorify terrorism. Where there is a failure to act, such as we've seen in Myanmar, the conclusions and results can be absolutely tragic. The DSA is making online platforms take the responsibility they properly should. They need to publish their algorithms, they need to take down fake information, and they need to respond rapidly to any incitement to violence, terrorist propaganda, or to publication of child porn. No online platform should be allowed to fail to take down problematic information.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. Let's see if I've understood this. The magnate, the multimillionaire, if he is in favour of woke ideology, investing in media, educational programs and all of that, then he's a philanthropist, such as George Soros, for instance, or Bill Gates. But if this multimillionaire buys a social network and opens it up to freedom so that it's actually organized by itself, then he's a Nazi. He's been called a Nazi. You want to give lessons on what disinformation is, and yet many of you have said that Elon Musk did a Nazi salute yesterday. Now, moderators, unfortunately, are biased, and the companies that are supposed to be moderating have been told that they need to be arrogant and look down on citizens as minors, which makes them biased. And apparently that is giving us greater freedom, but what we're propagating here is a return to censorship.
Magoni.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you very much, President. The DSA aspires to safeguard democracy from the dangers of the online world. Disinformation, incitement to hatred, manipulation, and evil campaigns online. But the promises offered by this legislation are coming up against the reality on the ground. Freedom of expression is going to be sacrificed on the altar of invasive approaches such as we see in America. We can't simply tackle the question of disinformation as a technical issue. It is a political, par excellence, political issue, and also a cultural issue. We need to educate our citizens. We need to make them aware of what is going on online, but we mustn't have recourse to too many rules and regulations which undermine the very democracy we seek to protect. The real risk is that the Commission is taking action excessively slowly, and disinformation is therefore able to shape public debate before any intervention takes place. The DSA should be an instrument which serves to make people take up the responsibilities they should, rather than exert control. The left is simply blinded by anti-fascist propaganda in Europe, and this is not in line at all with our democratic values. Thank you.
Madam President, thank you very much. We have witnessed how Russia tried to intervene by social media in the elections on Moldavian territory, in Georgia, This debate, unfortunately, is still here. Today, it's not just about Russia that is set on destroying Europe in the digital world. The internet, unfortunately, has become another battlefield, and it is up to us to make sure that we can defend Europe, can we defend democracy, and we are facing more elections also in Poland, and you don't want the Kremlin to decide the result of it. It is also about the safety and security of our children, and I'm myself a father, and I do know that about 50% of kids aged 4 to 9 years old own a smartphone. That is why we do have to care about who is going to interfere in our lives via the digital technology. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sophie Wilmès.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Everybody has the right to express their views, including Mr. Musk. Freedom of expression must respect a certain number of principles. It cannot be a tool to betray or defame, and it needs to be applied equally to everybody, and it can't be used to forward a certain narrative or a certain ideology or the interests of a particular individual. We have a Digital Services Act, and this first and foremost is to protect users and our fundamental rights. But to ensure that this is effective, we need to have investigations that are carried out and penalties when there are breaches. Nobody is above the law. How can we explain the fact that an investigation started in 2023 has still not been finished? Platforms still have not been held accountable. How many investigations have been set up since, Madam Commissioner? We need to have a clear response from the Commission on this. Madam Commissioner, we need to do better. We need to do a lot better. And we are seeing we need to be quick in our analysis and effective when applying our rules. Thank you.
The next, other than on the screen, it was a mistake, is Mr. Eriksson. Dick Eriksson. Yeah, Dick Eriksson, you have the floor. Dick Eriksson has the floor. He's not in the room? Yeah, please. It's better to be in the room during the debate so it does not happen.
Då ska vi se. Remember, eller jag ska ta det på svenska, det är bättre.
I think I'll do it in Swedish, that will be better. All dictatorships historically have restricted the freedom of expression with the purpose of preventing disinformation and lies, they say. That is why the DSA is a tragic piece of legislation that plays with fire. I want to safeguard our European Enlightenment tradition. I could quote Voltaire. I dislike what you say, but I'm prepared to die for your right to express your views. This is a very fundamental principle that goes much deeper than any individual piece of legislation. Now, the challenge to our Western values should be met in an open debate. It seems so odd to me that many people in this chamber do not believe in our values. They feel the need to censor and to stop. I'm convinced that we will win every debate with Russia, China, and any other dictatorship that tries to undermine our values. We need to deal with them in an open debate and not by trying to adopt their methods. This is fundamental in safeguarding our freedom of expression rather than chasing after increased control. Thank you.
Is Reinier van Lanschot.
Imagine that everything we do online is like an ocean.
In that ocean, social media are islands, and some of those islands enable people to connect and participate in the public debate. But in this vast digital ocean, some social media are not islands, but icebergs. Icebergs where you only see the content the owner of that platform wants you to see. Other opinions are kept underwater, and Elon Musk has transformed X into such an iceberg. He orders his own algorithms to spread his destructive vision and influence elections in Europe. These icebergs also allow hostile secret services to damage our democracy. Armies of trolls push extremist pro-Russian political parties like the AfD. And this is happening as we speak. We ask, therefore, the European Commission to rescue our democracy from the armies of trolls and trigger the crisis response mechanisms immediately.
The next speaker is Alice Teodorescu-Mauve.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, everybody in theory is in favour of freedom of expression, many with the proviso that they are good and they have an obligation to protect society from dangerous expressions from those who are bad. As long as we're stuck in this corrupt but efficient way of thinking, our free society will not be able to fully leverage the benefits of the freedom of expression. At the same time, we're undervaluing the fact that it is reality that affects political choices. Those who limit freedom of expression limit democracy. Those who dare strengthen the freedom of expression, including when opinions differ from our own, will strengthen democracy. No EU legislation should be used to stamp out political differences in thinking. There's no exact template for how we deal with bitter desk warriors or enemy states and their disinformation, but it remains our most important tool, namely a free exchange of views. Freedom of expression in Europe must be the very cornerstone of how we apply modern legislation such as the Digital Services Act, particularly when we have many short-term opportunistic arguments that would encourage us to do the opposite. Thank you.
Il dibattito di questa mattina
This morning's debate has shown us many things. Inter alia, that for people on the right, freedom of expression means that it should be possible in Europe to discriminate against women, to say that homosexuals are mentally ill, and to operate with non-transparent algorithms which allow no transparency and indeed allow people to fly under the radar. This Parliament has decided to stand up and be counted and to defend freedom of information, which needs to be respected without fear. Commissioner Virkkunen, let's not waste any more time. We have an opportunity here. We're being accused of tyranny. We need to ask for respect for our policies. We will not tolerate interference in our democratic life. We are not going to allow this sort of manipulation and abuse by those in power and those who have wealth. We need to make the right choices and we need to stand by them. Thank you.
Coming in. Please, the colleagues who come in, you can walk, but please don't talk. If you have to talk or to speak, you can go outside because the debate is still going on. And I now give the floor to Petra Steger, please.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This whole debate is incredible. If you listen to some of the people who've spoken today, it really is high time to say no more. When we talk here about democracy and freedom, it's often nothing more than a frontal attack on the citizens of Europe. This Digital Services Act is supposed to be a tool against disinformation. But then look at Mr. Breton. He wants to cancel whole elections if he doesn't like the results. And this is nothing more than a tool for censorship. Censorship, the worst kind. And it is forcing platforms to remove content. You want to combat fake news and this content, but really what it's about is about limiting opinions that you do not like. Is that really your view of what freedom is? If that is the case, then you are completely wrong. You don't protect democracies by banning freedom of speech with fact checkers or cancelling elections. No. Otherwise, it's just a facade of democracy. Thank you.
The next speaker is Marcos Quarta. 1 minute, and please keep the time.
Signor Presidente, onorevoli colleghi.
President, colleagues, the Digital Services Act could constitute a crucial step in guaranteeing balance and opportunity in the digital services market. However, the interpretation of the provisions hitherto has shown that there is no appropriate boundary between rights and obligations, and therefore you can't demand a safe online space unless you have realistic parameters. And some of these principles are non-negotiable. We are determined to make sure that regulation does not become an instrument which simply serves to suffocate inconvenient views and to stifle freedom of expression. We demand freedom. We demand digital freedom, and we demand the right to build a digital future based on fundamental rights and global leadership of Europe. Thank you.
Sean Kelly for 1.5 minutes.
Good. After 3 hours in the chamber, I finally get the podium. Commissioner. The Digital Services Act is a powerful tool to protect democracy and ensure that social media platforms operate responsibly. However, its potential will only be realised if it is properly enforced. Right now, we are falling short, and the consequences are evident, not only for our democracies, but for our most vulnerable citizens, our children. Minors are not just passive users of social media, they are active participants, often engaging with technology designed without their safety in mind. Algorithms prioritise sensationalism and addictive content, exposing children to harmful practices, inappropriate material and exploitative advertising. Loot boxes that mimic gambling, influencers pushing vaping and target ads for unhealthy products are just the tip of the iceberg. Recent studies show that nearly 60% of children aged 8 to 12 have encountered harmful content online. Behind these numbers are real children whose well-being and development are being undermined by the greed of platforms that prioritise profit over protection. Platforms must be held accountable for their algorithms, their recommender systems and their content moderation or lack thereof. Protecting democracy and protecting minors must go hand in hand.
The next speaker is Veronika Shifrova-Ostrionova. Sorry.
Thank you. As a former journalist, I value the freedom of speech very dearly, and let me be very clear. The DSA and fact-checking protect this freedom. Fact-checking flags disinformation and keeps social media open for honest and transparent debate. Are we suppressing opinions? Look around this chamber. I think every opinion here is well represented on social media and elsewhere. We must act and enforce the DSA to ensure that platforms used by European citizens are transparent, accountable and respectful of our rules. But let me say this. Can you see what we are doing? We are merely reacting, and we will surely continue to do so. But reacting is not enough. We must move beyond the reaction mode and stop only responding to what happens in the US or elsewhere. Innovation, research, business and education have never been more important than they are today. Let this be the main lesson of this long debate to take from here. I want a future where Europe dares to lead the way. So let's start working on this here together. Thank you.
The next speaker is Krzysztof Smiszek.
In October, precisely in this room, we were protesting against Russian interference in the Moldovan election. Then we also, in December, during the presidential election, we were supporting Romania in its fight with disinformation on TikTok. And recently, Trump's main ally interferes into our politics. What will we do when Musk is playing with algorithms on his platform? We have the appropriate tool. We have the DSA. We worked hard on it, but we are unable to use it effectively. It is time to act. The far right talks about the freedom of speech. When finally will you distinguish manipulation and propaganda from access to democracy and information? This oligarch may be on your side now, but and the next one may not be. And what will you do then?
Mes chers collègues, le débat de ce matin est éclairant. Contrairement à ce qu'on a voulu nous faire croire, le sujet, c'est de parler.
The question this morning is not just censorship or not censor or otherwise, freedom of speech or the opposite. We are talking about sovereignty, and sovereignty in Europe is absolutely critical. We're talking about sovereignty of the European Union, of European nations, of European member states. This sovereignty is under threat today because of the billionaires of Silicon Valley who simply want to enslave the peoples of Europe. And the worst thing about it is that the lobbyists are getting their message across through the mouths of those here in Europe on the extreme right who claim to defend our sovereignty. And yet our workers, our business and our society is simply being sacrificed to serve the interests of the entrepreneurs and billionaires of Silicon Valley. Madam President, you must stand up and be counted with us and defend the freedom, the rights and the futures of our citizens on behalf of all those amongst us who are fighting for it. Thank you.
Gracias, Presidenta. Directo al grano en este tema.
Thank you, President. On this topic, we're talking about European strategic sovereignty, and this has been touched on in many of the previous speeches. There are many who are denouncing interference in electoral processes, but the US and some union states do it too when they feel that it is opportune. In Venezuela, Algeria and Colombia, that we have clear examples. This is being used to service a specific political agenda. The problem isn't the political leaning of a media organization. It is how algorithms are manipulated or surveys are organized to amplify certain opinions. We need the Commission to not limit itself. It has the necessary tools to investigate and act fully. We must not avoid confrontation. Political totalitarian agendas will otherwise move forward. We need a sanctions regime for the DSA because we cannot allow for political discourse apologizing for totalitarian ideologies to take power of our social networks. Thank you.
President Trump is decreeing protection for freedom of speech in the USA, and in the EU they want even more censorship. What kind of policy is that? This is how autocratic regimes respond. We're seeing an EU USSR type regime being implemented here. This is not about fighting real crime. For that, we don't need a DSA. No, it's about Alice Weidel and Elon Musk having a conversation on X. And citizens should be able to draw their own opinions and step back from state propaganda. There are many countries that monitor and this, what's happening here, is purely Orwellian. You are besmirching the concept of democracy here. And we don't expect anything else from extremists here. This is your type of democracy and your approach to Europe. Thank you.
There is a blue card from Mrs. Vandenberg. Do you accept the blue card from Mrs. Vandenberg? Sometimes it's good to listen. Mrs. Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. During this debate, all the time, we are talking about censorship, but it's not about censorship, it's about openness of debate. Let us see what happens right now on Instagram. If you use the hashtag Democrat, you get no results. If you use the hashtag Republican, you get a lot of results. This is what happens if we don't regulate in a fair way and make sure that free speech is actually organized by rules. This is what we need.
Liebe Kollegin, die
Colleague, I can hear your message, but I don't believe it. In Germany, state media, when it has discriminated against the only real opposition in the country, the AfD, we're not invited to talk shows, we are dramatically underrepresented, and now a discussion with our lead candidate, Ms. Weidel, on social media with Elon Musk leads to a huge uproar. And this is purely hypocritical. There's a double standard being applied here, and we are fighting against that, and that is what needs to be done. Thank you.
There is Nicolau Alvanos. Alvanos, please.
Today's discussion is carried out deliberately and is marked by large-scale interests. At the heart of all this is a fierce competition between the US and the EU, an effort of EU monopolies to improve their stance and their position vis-à-vis the American ones. They're using pretexts such as protecting democracy, fighting foreign interventions, etc. But they're really trying to whitewash EU member states and financial conglomerates in order to demonize only their competitors. But what we see in the EU is an actual witch hunt against those who reject their tenets. They're blocking accounts who are trying to reveal the EU's escalating implication in the war in Ukraine or in the Palestinian genocide by the Israeli occupying state. And they're already using algorithms to intensify labor in Greece. So if we really want to serve the interests of the working class, we need to have socially owned means of production. We need to centrally plan the economy and to really serve the interest of popular straight and not capitalists.
Now, as we are already a long time over, I just can take 3 for Catch the Eye and then give the floor after that to the Commissioner. So first is Zeljana Zovko, then we have Maria Grappini, and then we have Diego Solier.
It has never been easier to access information, and yet it has never been ever easier to sell a lie. Is it true that the more smarter the phones are, the dumber is the person that is using it? We can hear in this debate many concerns about cybercrime and about DSA. I think that nowadays, when all the authoritarian regimes are using information as once used communist, fascist and national socialist, we have ourselves the tool that all the democracy in the world can only envy us about. So, dear Commissioner, I expect from you to implement this tool and to help our children and the youth and all of those who don't have such a privilege like us in this House to prevent manipulation of the information and to bring us back in the dark times of democracy. Thank you.
Maria Grappini.
Doamna președintă.
Chair, dear colleagues, Commissioner, today's debate shows that DSA does not work And it shows one more thing, that it has not been well understood, because I've seen many people from the far right saying that this regulation means that they do not have the right to communicate. But dear colleagues, democracy is not chaos. Democracy is a regulation. Democracy is equal rights for everyone. And your right reaches that far where it encompasses my right. Therefore, we need a regulation. We need transparency. What would you say, dear colleagues, if your kid killed himself because of manipulations from this social media? If you were attacked in front of your house because of unfair attacks on social networks? I think, Commissioner, that we have to explain why we need this regulation in all member states, and we also need to explain that everything that works in the European Union has to be respected by third countries, by those who are not part of the European Union. We need this regulation. Thank you very much.
Now I give the floor to Mr. Diego Solier.
Hoy hablamos de aplicar la DSA para salvaguardar.
We're talking about applying the DSA to save democracy and avoid manipulation. But I ask you, who are we saving democracy from and avoiding what kind of manipulation? The real problem is that the European establishment is looking at a situation where things have been customized for decades. Look at what's happening in Spain, for example. We have the television broadcasting company controlled by state powers, and we have seen this happen with Telefonica in Spain as well. The public authorities are holding the strings. Now, this European Parliament responds to citizens, European citizens, nothing else.
Floor to Henna Virkkunen, our Commissioner.
Thank you very much, dear President, honourable members. Thank you for this very lively debate and your very valuable contributions. This Commission and I personally, we are fully committed to promoting and protecting democracy across the EU. The DSA has given the Commission now the tool needed for a high level of responsibility by providers of online platforms, combined with very robust oversight. I will continue applying this critical tool together with the national digital services coordinators in an effective and accountable way. In this context, I vow advance with and accelerate the cases under the DSA and, while respecting due process, come to conclusions as early as legally possible with solid evidence in the open proceedings. It's very clear that everybody doing business in Europe or providing services in the EU has to respect our rules, which are very balanced and fair. Same rules for European companies and for those who are coming from the third countries. This DSA is also balancing freedom and responsibility. For example, when it's coming to content moderation, that was mentioned many times here, in the European Union, the reasons for the content moderation by the VLOPs are registered in a public database in Europe, and they must also publish biannual reports on their content moderation practices. So we have a great level of transparency here also when it comes to content moderation, and for these reasons. So the reasons are published. The users must also have the possibility to opt out of being profiled for their recommender system, giving users the option of alternative social media feeds. So transparency is a vital precondition for accountability in democracy, as we know. The Commission will present an ambitious approach in the Democracy Shield with a comprehensive all-of-society approach to face the multiple threats to our democracy. So I look forward to continuing this exchange with you.
Thank you. The next, now I give the floor to Adam Szlapka, he is Minister for the European Union in the Council. Please.
Madam President, honourable members, Madam Commissioner, after this very emotional debates, few remarks from the Council. The rules and values in the Digital Service Act are being tested in practice we are confident that the actions taken by the Commission and the national supervisors are timely and proportionate. The co-legislators introduced careful checks and balance into the DSA to ensure that fundamental rights, including the freedom of expression, are granted. Any action taken under the DCA should be taken in a way that respects the fundamental rights of the users, including the freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism. We should also not forget that in addition to the DCA, we have other legal instruments that have been adopted recently to fight disinformation and foreign interference, in particular the rules on political advertising and the Media Freedom Act. In cases where disinformation or interference are linked to a hybrid campaign by hostile third states or non-state actors, the EU has also taken action under the EU Hybrid Toolbox. It enables us to monitor threats, build social resilience, prevent incidents and react to them, including through diplomatic measures and, where appropriate, sanctions. We are finally also looking forward to the upcoming Commission's initiatives on a new European democracy shield. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now I will, die Aussprache ist jetzt geschlossen und es wird jetzt.
The debate is now concluded and we will have a very short break, really a very short break, and then we'll move on to the votes. Thank you.